Marcus Sterling stepped out of his sleek black limousine and adjusted his crisp suit. He was in the heart of his empire, Sterling Hotels, a chain he had painstakingly built from the ground up. With a reputation that rivaled the finest luxury chains across the country, it was hard to imagine anyone questioning his authority in his own business. But today was different. Today would change everything. He glanced up at the towering glass facade of the Sterling Grand, one of the most prestigious hotels in the chain. The shimmering logo on the building seemed to gleam proudly in the morning sun. This was the flagship location. The heart of his success. Yet something felt off as he walked toward the entrance, his polished dress shoes clicking against the smooth stone floor. A quick check of his watch confirmed he was right on time. A rare business meeting awaited inside, and Marcus needed to secure a room for the night before the negotiations began. As a CEO who had built his company from humble beginnings, he prided himself on staying connected with every aspect of the business, ensuring that each location ran smoothly. Today, though, something strange was about to unfold. He entered the lobby, the familiar scent of polished wood and fresh flowers filling the air. The luxurious surroundings gave him a sense of calm, but as he approached the check-in desk, a feeling of unease settled in the pit of his stomach. Behind the desk stood a young woman, maybe in her 20s, with a name tag reading, Rachel. She smiled at him, but there was something about her demeanor that felt off. "Good afternoon, sir," she greeted him with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good afternoon," Marcus replied, his tone polite but firm. "I have a reservation under Sterling. Marcus Sterling." Rachel's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she typed, her brow furrowing as she scanned the screen. Marcus glanced around, taking in the lobby with its modern art pieces and upscale guests. Everything appeared as it should. Yet, this brief moment of hesitation felt like a crack in the facade of perfection. "I'm sorry, sir," Rachel said after a long pause, her voice wavering slightly. "It seems we don't have a reservation under that name." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's impossible. I own this hotel. I'm Marcus Sterling." The words left his mouth as a mere formality. He had never imagined that he would have to assert his identity at his own establishment. But Rachel looked at him blankly, her fingers still poised over the keyboard as she scanned the system again. "I'm afraid I don't see any reservation for you, sir," she said, her tone cool and detached, as though this was a common occurrence. "We have a full house at the moment, but we do have rooms available at nearby locations in the city. Would you like me to assist you with that?" Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He was standing in his own hotel, and he was being treated like any other customer. Worse, he was being denied a room. For a moment, his mind raced. Was this some kind of prank? An unfortunate glitch in the system? Or was something more sinister at play? "No," Marcus said, trying to keep his composure. "I'm not leaving. I need a room, and I need it here. Right now." Rachel hesitated, and that hesitation only fueled Marcus' growing frustration. He had built Sterling Hotels with blood, sweat, and tears. He had worked tirelessly to ensure that each guest received the finest service. To be denied in his own hotel, was this an oversight, or something more? Something deliberate? Before he could press the issue, another voice interrupted him. "Is there a problem, Rachel?" Marcus turned to see a man in a suit approaching, older, probably in his mid-40s, with an air of authority that made it clear he was the manager. His name tag read, John. Rachel quickly explained the situation, mentioning that Marcus had no reservation in the system. John glanced at Marcus, his eyes briefly scanning him from head to toe. There was a flicker of recognition, but it was brief, almost imperceptible. "I'm afraid there's nothing we can do at the moment, sir," John said, his voice smooth but detached. "You can try another location in the city, or perhaps we can reschedule your stay for another time. I apologize for the inconvenience." Something in Marcus snapped. This was no simple mistake. His gut told him that something was wrong here, something deeper than a clerical error. He narrowed his eyes at John, his voice low and controlled. I own this hotel. I built this business. And now you're telling me there's no room for me? In my own establishment? John's smile faltered slightly, but he quickly recovered. I understand your frustration, sir. I'm sure we can sort this out later. But for now, I suggest you head to one of our partner hotels. Marcus' blood boiled, but he kept his cool. He knew what was happening now. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just a mistake. This was intentional. Something was off with the system, and it wasn't a technical glitch. It felt personal. Tell me, John, Marcus said, his tone now cold as ice, are you aware that I'm the CEO of this chain? John blinked, clearly surprised. Of course, sir. I was just. No, Marcus interrupted, stepping closer. Tell me this, why are you asking me to leave? Are you going to deny me a room because of the color of my skin? Is that it? John's eyes widened. No, sir. It's not like that. I assure you. Marcus held up a hand. I've worked too hard for too long to let people like you undermine everything I've built. I'll be back. Don't think you've seen the last of me. He turned on his heel and stormed out of the hotel, his mind racing. As he stepped back into the sunlight, his blood boiled with a mix of anger and disbelief. The thought of being turned away, especially in his own hotel, left a bitter taste in his mouth. But this wasn't just about him. No, it was bigger than that. This was a message. And Marcus was determined to make sure the people behind this mistake would regret it instantly. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Marcus' voice echoed in his head as he thought about how he would make this story known. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The fight was just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Marcus Sterling stared out of the window of his sleek black car as it sped down the street, the hum of the engine a constant companion to his racing thoughts. The crisp morning air had done little to cool the fire that burned inside him. It wasn't just the denial of a room at his own hotel, it was the principle of it, the realization that the system he had worked so hard to build had been manipulated by forces he never imagined. As the cityscape passed by, Marcus was reminded of how far he had come to get here, to this moment. His life hadn't always been this way, an influential CEO, a man with power and respect. Far from it. Growing up in the rough neighborhoods of Chicago, Marcus learned early that the world wasn't always kind to people like him. His father had walked out before he was born, leaving his mother, Diane, to raise him and his younger sister, Tasha, on her own. Diane was a powerhouse of determination, and it was her strength that had shaped Marcus into the man he was today. She worked tirelessly as a nurse, often working double shifts, just to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. While she provided for them, Marcus learned the value of hard work, but he also saw the struggles of being a black woman in a world that often overlooked or undervalued people like her. Despite the challenges, Diane always made sure Marcus and Tasha never lacked love or encouragement. It was her unspoken rule, education is the key. She pushed Marcus to excel in school, to use his intellect to rise above the limitations that society often imposed. Marcus, being a naturally curious child, took that to heart. He buried himself in books, devouring everything he could find. But beyond academics, he learned life lessons the hard way. Walking to school, he encountered the occasional street bully who saw him as an easy target, especially after he started to excel in his studies. When Marcus stood up for himself, his mother always reminded him, people fear what they don't understand. You let your actions speak louder than their words. Her advice stayed with him, and he grew into a confident young man, determined to prove everyone who doubted him wrong. By the time he entered high school, Marcus was a standout student. He was not just excelling in academics but also in extracurriculars. He joined the debate team and, through sheer will and intellect, became one of the top speakers in the state. But while his skills in speech and debate earned him praise, his skin color often led to subtle discrimination. He could feel it in the way teachers spoke to him versus other students, in the way people hesitated to acknowledge his accomplishments. It wasn't until he received a scholarship to a prestigious university that Marcus realized the depth of the discrimination he'd been facing. At first, it was exhilarating. He was the first in his family to attend college. But that excitement was often dampened by moments where he could sense the discomfort of his peers or professors when they learned about his background. Some were kind, but others showed clear signs of surprise, as though they expected someone of his background to never reach the level of success he had. College was a pivotal time for Marcus. He studied business administration, where his professors often encouraged him to pursue corporate careers. But Marcus, having experienced the corporate world firsthand during internships, knew there was a deeper issue at play. It wasn't enough to be good at business, you had to have the right connections, and you had to fit into a world that often didn't want people like him. The corporate ladder was rigged, and he had no intention of playing by its rules. He decided to carve his own path. After graduating, Marcus worked for a few startups and gained experience in hospitality management. But the real turning point came when he saw firsthand how black people were often treated differently, both as employees and guests, in the hospitality industry. Marcus knew then that he had a purpose, to build a company that would not only change the way black people were treated in the industry but also challenge the existing system that perpetuated discrimination. He started with small investments, buying rundown hotels and transforming them into upscale locations. His unique vision, focused on offering top-tier service with an emphasis on diversity and inclusivity, soon gained attention. As he gained momentum, his small company grew into Sterling Hotels, a chain of luxury hotels with a reputation for excellence. However, no matter how much success he accumulated, Marcus never forgot where he came from. His mother's influence shaped his philosophy on leadership. A true leader doesn't just pull people up, they pull the entire community up. That's why, despite his success, Marcus always made sure to give back, creating programs that helped young people from disadvantaged backgrounds find mentorship and opportunities in business. His legacy was more than just his hotels, it was the lives he helped change. Marcus' vision and perseverance paid off, and Sterling Hotels became one of the most recognized names in the industry. But with that success came challenges, rival companies, like the Hawkins Group, and old money that didn't take kindly to a self-made black man at the top. These people wanted to maintain the status quo, and they didn't want Marcus stirring things up, especially not in their industry. But Marcus had never been one to back down from a fight. As he sat in the back seat of his car, looking out over the city that had once felt so distant, Marcus realized something. All the late nights, all the sacrifices, all the challenges, this was why he had built his empire. Not just for himself, but for the future. For every person who had been held back because of their skin color, their background, or their social status. His empire, though seemingly invincible, was still vulnerable. And it wasn't just about him anymore. The denial of a room at his hotel, it wasn't just a random occurrence. This was an attack. Someone, somewhere, was trying to undermine him and his vision. And Marcus would stop at nothing to expose the truth. He knew this was just the beginning. Marcus had barely left the hotel lobby when his phone rang. It was Tasha, his younger sister, who had always been a sharp, no-nonsense woman. They had grown up together, and she had been by his side through every step of his journey. While Marcus was the public face of Sterling Hotels, Tasha was the backbone of their operations, managing the legal and financial aspects with a precision that had saved them from countless potential pitfalls. "Hey, Marcus," she said, her voice steady but with an underlying edge of concern. "I heard about what happened at the Sterling Grand. You okay?" Marcus paused, letting out a frustrated breath as he leaned against the car, gazing back at the hotel that had rejected him. The memory of being turned away stung worse with each passing second. "I'm fine," he replied, though his words didn't carry the usual confidence. "But this is more than just a mistake, Tasha. Something's off. I know it. This isn't just some glitch in their system." Tasha's voice grew more serious. "You think it's someone inside? Someone trying to sabotage you?" Marcus's mind raced, the realization that something deeper was at play settling in. The people at the hotel had been too calm, too efficient in their rejection. They had acted like it was just another day, another guest to turn away. But this was his hotel. His empire. If anyone had reason to go after him, it was the competition, Hawkins Group, the giant conglomerate that had been trying to push Sterling hotels out of the market for years. "Could be," Marcus muttered. "But I have a feeling it's more than that. I need to figure out who's behind this. Someone pulled some strings." Tasha paused before responding, her voice cool but determined. "You know, Marcus, I've been hearing rumors lately. Whispers from inside our own company. There are people who don't like the direction you're taking us. They don't like the inclusivity, the diversity you're pushing for. Some of them think you're going too fast, too big." Marcus' stomach churned. It was one thing to face opposition from outside forces, but it stung more when it came from within his own ranks. Those employees, people who had built their careers on the foundation of Sterling hotels, were now questioning the very principles that had led to its success. "I'll deal with it," Marcus said, his voice growing firm again. "But I need you to look into something. Dig deeper into the management team at Sterling Grand. Find out if anyone's been acting strange. We need to know who's behind this." "I'm on it," Tasha replied, her tone already shifting into work mode. "Just keep your head cool, Marcus. We'll get to the bottom of this." As the call ended, Marcus took a deep breath and looked up at the towering building before him. He had built Sterling hotels with the belief that success didn't come at the cost of integrity. But now, it felt like that very integrity was under siege. The rejection at Sterling Grand had ignited something within him, a fire that he hadn't known existed in this new phase of his life. There had been many moments when Marcus had been tested. He had fought to overcome the limitations placed on him because of his race, his background, and the prejudices of others. But this was different. This wasn't about prejudice from the outside world. This was an internal betrayal. Someone within his own company was willing to tear down the very foundation he had built. He climbed back into the car, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on his chest. The driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror, sensing the shift in Marcus' mood. But Marcus didn't respond. His mind was elsewhere, focused on the one question that had become his obsession in the past few hours: who would do this to him, and why? The Hawthorne Group, the name loomed in Marcus' thoughts like a dark cloud. For years, the media had speculated that Sterling Hotels was on a collision course with the corporate giant. The Hawkins Group was a conglomerate of hotels, resorts, and other luxury businesses. Their massive reach had been steadily growing, and they had an interest in acquiring properties just like Sterling Hotels. Rumors had circulated that Hawkins Group had been behind several hostile takeovers in the past, leveraging insider connections and underhanded tactics to swallow up smaller competitors. But it wasn't just Hawkins Group that Marcus had to worry about. There were always those within his company, the ones who were dissatisfied with his progressive approach. People who didn't believe in shaking up the industry, who felt uncomfortable with his insistence on diversity in leadership and hospitality. The world of high-stakes business wasn't a playground for the faint of heart. It was a game of power, manipulation, and strategy. Marcus had played the game long enough to know that every move mattered. And right now, someone had made a move that would come with consequences. But it wasn't just about business, it was personal. As the car sped towards his office downtown, Marcus' phone buzzed again. It was a text from Liam, his right-hand man and the chief operations officer of Sterling Hotels. "Marcus, we need to talk. Something's not right with Sterling Grand. I've heard whispers about management pushing back against your vision. They've been making quiet moves behind your back." Marcus' pulse quickened. It was one thing for rumors to circulate in the halls, but it was another thing entirely to hear that the management team was actively working against him. This wasn't just an issue of being rejected from his own hotel, it was about the future of Sterling Hotels. He typed a quick reply, "Meet me at my office. We need to have a serious discussion. Something's going on at Sterling Grand." The next few hours felt like a blur as Marcus and Liam sat together in the high-rise office overlooking the city. Liam laid out the information he had gathered: whispers of discontent among the management team, a handful of employees who seemed too eager to make Marcus' life difficult, and a growing sense that something larger was brewing beneath the surface. It was clear now, Sterling Hotels was under attack. But it wasn't just the competition from outside. The attack was coming from within. Tasha's earlier warning echoed in Marcus' mind. This wasn't just about rejecting a room. It was a message. A declaration of war from people who believed that the path Marcus had chosen for his company was the wrong one. He wasn't just building hotels, he was building a movement. And movements always made enemies. As Marcus looked out the window at the city skyline, he made a silent vow to himself. He would not let this stand. He would fight back. This was just the beginning. Marcus' mind was sharp, but the events of the past few hours had shaken him. The sudden realization that there were people inside his own company conspiring against him weighed heavily on his shoulders. The rejection at Sterling Grand wasn't just a random incident, it was a calculated move to undermine his authority, a message sent from those who resented his vision for Sterling Hotels. He paced in his office, hands shoved deep into the pockets of his tailored suit. The glass walls of his office offered a panoramic view of the city, but Marcus couldn't see the skyline. All he could see was the shadow of betrayal creeping into his once unshakable empire. Liam, who had been Marcus' trusted ally for years, stood by the desk, his brow furrowed with concern. The atmosphere between them was thick with urgency. The stakes had never been higher, and both men knew that there was no room for error. "I don't like this, Marcus," Liam said, breaking the silence. "This goes beyond a few disgruntled employees. Someone's playing a long game, and it's starting to get personal. We need to find out who's behind it." Marcus stopped pacing and turned to face Liam. His eyes narrowed with determination. "We will. But we need to move fast. They think they've caught me off guard, but they've underestimated me. Whoever's behind this is going to regret it." Liam nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I'll start digging into the management team at Sterling Grand. I'll work with Tasha to get a list of anyone who might be involved. But we need more than just internal intel. We need to get eyes on the competition. Hawkins' group has been sniffing around, and I'm willing to bet they're behind some of this." Marcus walked over to the window, his reflection staring back at him from the glass. The weight of the years of hard work, the sleepless nights, and the countless sacrifices to get to this point was now a distant memory. What mattered now was survival. His hotel empire was in jeopardy, and he needed to protect everything he had built, not just for him, but for the employees who had put their trust in him, and for the future of the black community he was determined to uplift through his success. "Do whatever it takes," Marcus said firmly, his voice steely. "I want to know who's pulling the strings. Find out where the money's coming from. Whoever's behind this isn't just attacking me, they're attacking everything I stand for." As Liam nodded and left the room, Marcus sank into the leather chair behind his desk, letting out a deep breath. His mind raced through all the possible scenarios, running through every person, every possible lead. Hawkins' group was a powerful adversary, but Marcus wasn't afraid. He had faced adversity his entire life. No matter how high the stakes, he had always come out on top. But this was different. This was a war. Marcus knew that in order to win, he would have to fight on multiple fronts. It wasn't just about taking down the people behind the sabotage, it was about proving that he would not back down, that he was stronger than they ever realized. The conspiracy ran deeper than anyone could have imagined. As night fell, Marcus found himself back at the Sterling Grand. The hotel was practically empty, save for a few staff members wrapping up their shifts. The once bustling lobby was quiet, almost eerie in its stillness. Marcus had insisted on returning to the hotel himself, wanting to inspect everything with his own eyes. The front desk clerk, a young woman named Rachel, looked up from her computer when Marcus entered. She smiled awkwardly but seemed nervous, as though she wasn't sure how to act around the CEO of the company. "Mr. Sterling," she said, standing up. "I wasn't expecting you tonight. Is everything okay?" Marcus forced a smile, though he wasn't feeling very friendly. "I'm just here to check in on a few things. How's everything running tonight?" Rachel hesitated before responding, as though considering how much she should reveal. "It's been quiet, Mr. Sterling. Everything's in order, I suppose." Her hesitance didn't go unnoticed by Marcus. The unease in her tone didn't sit right. Something was off. "I'm going to take a walk through the hotel," Marcus said, his voice calm but purposeful. "I'll let you know if I need anything." As he walked deeper into the hotel, the sense of something lurking in the shadows grew. It wasn't just the physical space that felt wrong, it was the energy. Something had shifted, and Marcus could feel it deep in his gut. He passed through the grand atrium, with its towering marble columns and gleaming chandeliers. Everything about the space screamed luxury, opulence, and success. Yet beneath the polished surfaces, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there was a fracture somewhere within. A crack in the foundation that threatened to bring it all down. He reached the back office area, where some of the hotel's key managers were likely finishing up their work for the night. As he approached, he noticed a couple of familiar faces, a few department heads who had been with Sterling Hotels since the beginning. But the moment they saw Marcus walking toward them, their expressions quickly shifted from casual to tense. "Good evening, Mr. Sterling," said Victor, the hotel manager, his voice slightly strained. "I wasn't expecting you tonight. Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," Marcus replied, his tone unwavering. "I just wanted to check in and make sure there were no issues." Victor shifted uncomfortably. "Of course, everything's under control, as always." Marcus eyed him for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Keep it that way." He turned and walked out without another word, sensing that the encounter had been a little too perfect. It was as if they were all waiting for something to happen. Their behavior was stiff, overly polite. In any other situation, he might have written it off as the usual formalities of running a large hotel, but tonight, it felt like a carefully orchestrated performance. When Marcus returned to the lobby, he couldn't help but notice the strange silence that hung in the air. He had seen it before, when something was amiss, when people were afraid of the consequences of speaking out. It all clicked. This wasn't just an isolated incident. There were people in this very hotel who were part of the conspiracy. But who? And how far did it go? He needed answers, and he needed them now. As he stepped into the elevator to leave, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Tasha. "Got a lead. Meet me at the office tomorrow morning. We've got a big breakthrough." Marcus couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. But he knew it wouldn't be easy. The enemy was closing in, and he had to act fast. But one thing was certain, he would fight back with everything he had. The war had only just begun. The next morning, Marcus sat in his office, his mind still buzzing from the events of the previous night. He had barely slept, his thoughts consumed by the unsettling encounters at Sterling Grand. Every corner of the hotel seemed to hide something, a subtle whisper of a conspiracy that was growing more complex by the minute. He had to know who was behind it, and why. Tasha had sent a cryptic message earlier, "We've got a lead. Meet me at the office." Marcus could feel the pulse of tension in his chest as he stared out the window, the city skyline bathed in early morning light. But it wasn't the view he was focused on, it was the burning question at the forefront of his mind: who could he trust? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening. Tasha walked in, her face unusually serious. There was no sign of her typical quick smile, her sharp wit that usually lightened the room. Today, her eyes were fixed with a piercing intensity, a sign that something significant had happened overnight. "You've got to see this," she said, walking over to his desk and handing him a stack of papers. Marcus frowned but took them, scanning the top sheet. "What is this?" he asked, his voice steady despite the nervous anticipation crawling under his skin. Tasha took a deep breath, then sat down across from him. "I went through every account, every record we have from Sterling Grand, the transactions, the staff reports, and I found something. There's a pattern, Marcus. A connection that leads straight to Hawkins Group." Marcus felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Hawkins Group, the corporate giant that had long been rumored to want a piece of Sterling Hotels. But what did this mean? Did they really have a hand in sabotaging his hotel? Tasha continued, her voice low but firm. "I dug deeper. There are several payments, small ones, moving through accounts that are linked directly to Hawkins Group. It looks like they've been funneling money to some of our senior staff members, specifically at Sterling Grand. And it's been happening for months, Marcus." The world around him seemed to slow down as the weight of her words hit him like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just sabotage, it was a full-fledged corporate conspiracy. People inside his company had been working with Hawkins Group to bring him down, all while pretending to support his vision. Marcus' heart raced. He stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth as the reality of the situation sank in. The people he had trusted, the ones who had been with him through thick and thin, were now betraying him. But why? What could Hawkins Group want with his hotel chain beyond the obvious? Tasha's voice broke through his thoughts. "I've been going through some of the names, Marcus. One of the senior managers at Sterling Grand, Victor Gray, has been involved in these transactions. He's been meeting with Hawkins Group executives. And the worst part? He's been doing it behind your back for a long time." Marcus froze. Victor. The same manager who had been so awkward and stiff with him just the night before. The one who had acted like nothing was wrong, like he hadn't just rejected his own CEO from his own hotel. "Victor?" Marcus whispered, his voice thick with disbelief. "But why? He's been with Sterling Hotels for years. I trusted him." Tasha's eyes softened, her voice filled with sympathy. "I know, Marcus. I know. But sometimes, even the people we trust the most have their own motivations. Victor was always ambitious, but I never thought he'd go this far. He probably thought Hawkins Group could offer him more power, more control. They've been recruiting disgruntled executives, trying to break into the luxury market, and Sterling Hotels was in their way." Marcus sank back into his chair, feeling the weight of the revelation settle like a stone in his chest. He had built Sterling Hotels to be a place of empowerment for the marginalized, a company that stood for inclusion, diversity, and excellence. And now, the very people who had benefited from that vision were turning on him. But there was something deeper, something that gnawed at him. Hawkins Group hadn't just been going after the company, they were going after him. Victor had been playing the long game, working both sides. He hadn't just been a cog in a machine. He had been a deliberate part of a larger, more calculated scheme to take Marcus down, to destroy the empire that had been built on Marcus' own sweat and blood. "Victor's not going to get away with this," Marcus said, his voice hardening. "We need to take him down. But we also need to find out how deep this goes. Who else is involved?" Tasha nodded, her expression resolute. "I'm already working on it. But we have to be careful, Marcus. These people know how to cover their tracks. We can't afford to make any mistakes. Marcus's mind raced. There was no way he could sit back and let this happen. His whole life had been leading up to this moment, this fight to protect everything he had worked for, everything he believed in. The betrayal cut deep, but it also ignited a fire within him, a fire that would not be extinguished until he had uncovered the full extent of the conspiracy and exacted his revenge. Suddenly, Marcus knew exactly what he had to do. "We go on the offensive," he declared, his voice brimming with conviction. "I'll confront Victor today. We need to get him to talk, to expose everyone involved. And we'll take this straight to the board. If Hawkins Group thinks they can buy us out from under our noses, they've got another thing coming." Tasha looked at him, a flicker of pride in her eyes. "You're going to confront him yourself?" Marcus nodded. "If there's one thing I know, it's that when betrayal comes knocking, the only way to deal with it is head-on. Victor thinks he can play me, but he doesn't know who he's dealing with. I didn't get here by running from a fight." Hours later, Marcus found himself standing in front of Victor's office at Sterling Grand. He had requested a meeting under the guise of discussing operations, but he wasn't there to talk. He was there to get answers. Victor looked up from his desk as Marcus entered, a fake smile stretching across his face. "Marcus. What a surprise. What's this about?" Marcus shut the door behind him with a deliberate click. There was no warmth in his eyes. Only cold determination. "I know what you've been doing, Victor," Marcus said, his voice low, but firm. "And I know who you've been working with. You're not going to get away with this." Victor's face paled, but he quickly recovered, his eyes flickering with a mix of guilt and arrogance. "I don't know what you're talking about." Marcus stepped forward, his posture unyielding. "Cut the act. I know about the payments from Hawkins Group. I know about your meetings. You think you can stab me in the back and walk away unscathed? You've underestimated me." For a moment, Victor's bravado faltered, and Marcus saw the first real crack in his facade. Victor had been playing both sides, thinking he could ride the coattails of Hawkins Group while betraying the very company that had given him everything. But Marcus wasn't going to let him get away with it. Victor shifted in his seat, looking for a way out. "You don't understand, Marcus. This wasn't personal. It was about survival. Hawkins Group offered me power, influence, something you couldn't give me." Marcus' jaw tightened. "You sold out. And now you'll pay the price." Marcus walked out of Victor's office, his mind swirling. The confrontation had been intense, but there was still no time to dwell on the emotions that were flooding him. His chest tightened as he walked through the corridors of the hotel, the quiet hum of the elevators and soft footsteps of staff echoing in his ears. But none of it felt real. It was as though the walls were closing in around him, and all he could think of was the enemy lurking in the shadows, waiting for him to slip up. He had confronted Victor, but that was only one small battle. The war was far from over. Hawkins Group had sent their agents into his organization, and now he knew what he was up against. But the more Marcus thought about it, the more his resolve hardened. If anything, he would make them regret ever underestimating him. His phone buzzed, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was Tasha. The message was short, but the urgency in her words couldn't be ignored. "Meet me at the office. We have a bigger problem." When Marcus arrived at Sterling Hotel's headquarters, the air felt heavy with the weight of impending change. Tasha was already waiting for him in the conference room, her eyes narrowed with focus. She was working her phone, no doubt tracking down more information about Victor and the conspiracy that had infiltrated their ranks. "Marcus," she said, without looking up, "I found something." Her voice was tight, like a coiled spring ready to snap. "The payments from Hawkins Group, they're not just for Victor. There are several more names on the list. This goes all the way to the top." Marcus' heart skipped a beat. The words hung in the air like a bomb ready to explode. What do you mean, Tasha? Who else is involved? She turned to face him, her expression grim. I've traced it all the way back to the board of directors. Richard Hastings, one of the most influential figures on the board, has been working with Hawkins Group for months. The entire reason behind their attacks on Sterling Grand, and now on you, is to take over your company. Marcus felt the ground beneath him shift. Richard Hastings, the very person who had supported him from the beginning, the man who had helped him build Sterling Hotels into the success it was today. He was a traitor. The very notion hit Marcus like a physical blow. Richard had been in his corner, cheering him on, acting as if he was on his side, but behind the scenes, he was plotting against everything Marcus had worked for. Are you sure? Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper. Tasha nodded, her face hardening. I've got the receipts. There are bank transfers, secret meetings, and the truth is right in front of us. Hawkins Group has been playing the long game, getting the right people inside your company, eroding your trust from within, and now, they want to take over. They've already made a deal with Richard. He's been promised control of Sterling Hotels once they push you out. A chill ran down Marcus' spine. His mind reeled with thoughts of betrayal. He had built this company from the ground up, fought tooth and nail to get to the top. And now, everything he had worked for was on the line. The feeling of betrayal cut deeper than he could have imagined, but this wasn't just about him anymore. This isn't just about losing the company, Marcus said, his voice quiet but full of determination. This is about everything we've worked for, everything I've fought for. The future I promised to build for the community. For my people. Tasha placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression softening. I know, Marcus. And we're not going to let it happen. We're going to expose them, every last one of them. For a long moment, Marcus stood in silence, his gaze fixed on the floor. His mind raced, trying to process the enormity of the situation. The fight had grown much bigger than he ever expected. He wasn't just fighting against a couple of rogue employees. He was fighting against an entire system designed to crush him, to take what was rightfully his. But Marcus had never been one to back down from a fight. Let's do it, Marcus finally said, his voice low but full of a newfound strength. Let's take them down. We go public. We expose everything, Hawkins Group, Richard Hastings, and every person who's been part of this conspiracy. I'll take it straight to the board. They'll have no choice but to listen when I show them the truth. Tasha's eyes lit up with approval. That's what I like to hear. We have all the evidence we need. We just need to present it to the right people. Marcus gave a slow nod. We'll make them regret ever trying to tear me down. Later that day, Marcus found himself walking into the Sterling Hotel's boardroom, his footsteps purposeful. The room was filled with the usual faces, wealthy investors, seasoned executives, and key members of the board. But as Marcus stepped inside, he knew this would be no ordinary meeting. The stakes were too high, the betrayal too deep. Richard Hastings was sitting at the head of the table, looking as composed as ever. But Marcus could see the tension in his eyes. The man knew something was coming. Gentlemen, Marcus began, his voice cutting through the silence, today, I'm going to show you something you never expected. He motioned for Tasha to bring the projector to life. As the evidence unfolded on the screen behind him, bank transfers, emails, documents that linked Richard and others on the board to Hawkins Group, Marcus watched as the faces around the table shifted from confusion to shock, and finally, to fear. What is this? Richard Hastings asked, his voice thick with panic, but Marcus could hear the underlying tremor. This, Marcus said, is the evidence of your betrayal. The payments, the meetings, your deal with Hawkins Group. You thought you could destroy everything I've built, but you underestimated me. You thought I wouldn't find out. The board members exchanged nervous glances, but Richard stood up, trying to salvage his composure. You can't prove any of this, Marcus. This is all fabricated. It's not fabricated, Marcus interjected, cutting him off. It's the truth. And today, we're going to make sure the world knows. There was a long, uncomfortable silence as the room digested the magnitude of the situation. But Marcus could feel the weight lifting from his shoulders. The truth had come to light. His fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was in control again. As the meeting ended, Richard Hastings was escorted out of the room, his face red with embarrassment. The other board members were still in shock, but Marcus knew he had made his point. This wasn't just about saving his company, it was about exposing the corruption that had wormed its way into the heart of Sterling Hotels. Later, as Marcus sat in his office, reflecting on the events of the day, he couldn't help but think back to the journey that had brought him here. The betrayal had shaken him, but it had also reaffirmed something he already knew: he wasn't just building a hotel chain. He was building a legacy. And no one, not even the powerful forces of Hawkins Group, could take that away from him. The days following the confrontation in the boardroom were a whirlwind of media coverage, legal battles, and phone calls from investors, employees, and even the press. Hawkins Group was scrambling to distance themselves from Richard Hastings and the board members involved in the conspiracy, but it was too late. The truth had come to light, and Marcus was determined to use every ounce of power at his disposal to ensure that his company would emerge victorious. Marcus sat in his office, the weight of the world still on his shoulders. His mind was constantly running, evaluating the next steps he needed to take. Despite the public revelation, there was no guarantee that Sterling Hotels would be safe from Hawkins Group's influence. The enemy was still out there, and Marcus knew that he couldn't afford to relax until they were fully eliminated from the equation. Tasha entered the office, holding a folder thick with documents. Her expression was intense, but there was a spark of determination in her eyes. Marcus stood up from behind his desk, giving her his full attention. "Do we have a plan?" he asked, his voice steady. "We do," Tasha replied, laying the folder on his desk. "I've been working with our legal team, and we've got a strategy. The first thing we need to do is completely sever any remaining ties with Hawkins Group. We need to cut them off from our operations completely. No more business dealings, no more collaborations. We need to make it clear that their involvement with us is over." Marcus nodded. He had already suspected that this was the first step, but hearing Tasha lay it out in black and white confirmed his thoughts. Hawkins Group needed to be neutralized, and the best way to do that was to make sure they had no access to Sterling Hotels in any capacity. "We've already started working on the public relations side," Tasha continued, pacing back and forth as she spoke. "We've got press releases ready to go. We'll make a statement, not just about Hawkins Group, but about the corrupt individuals within Sterling Hotels. We'll make sure the public knows exactly who was behind the scheme and how we've taken immediate action to restore integrity to the company." Marcus's lips tightened into a thin line as he processed her words. It was time for a full-on counterattack. He wouldn't just defend his company, he would take the fight to Hawkins Group, showing them that they had miscalculated by ever crossing him. "Good," Marcus said, his eyes blazing with determination. "But that's just the beginning. I need you to start identifying who in our ranks is still loyal, and who might still be a risk. We need to make sure there are no more surprises." Tasha gave him a knowing look. "I'm already on it. I'll have a full report by the end of the week. But there's one more thing we need to consider." "What's that?" Marcus asked, his curiosity piqued. "Hawkins Group isn't going to go down without a fight," she replied. "We both know they've got resources, legal, financial, and political. They won't just roll over. They'll retaliate, and when they do, we need to be ready." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. He had expected this. Hawkins Group wasn't the type to walk away quietly, especially not after being publicly exposed. But Marcus was ready. His entire life had been about overcoming the odds, and this battle would be no different. "We won't let them take us down," he said firmly. We've been pushed too far. Now it's time to show them who they're really dealing with. The next few days were a blur of strategic meetings, late-night phone calls with his legal team, and urgent conversations with investors. Marcus knew that the future of Sterling Hotels was hanging by a thread. If he wasn't careful, the corporate machine that was Hawkins Group could pull enough strings to weaken his position. But Marcus was no stranger to adversity. This was his fight, and he was prepared to do whatever it took to win. Tasha's report came in, and as promised, it was thorough. It outlined potential risks, identified key players who could still be loyal to Hawkins Group, and even suggested proactive measures to shore up the company's defenses. It wasn't just about protecting the assets of Sterling Hotels, it was about protecting the values that had driven him from the start. Marcus looked over the report, his mind working through the implications of each finding. We need to tighten security. We can't afford any leaks or last-minute surprises. Tasha nodded. I've already put a new security protocol in place. No one gets in or out without clearance. We'll be on top of it. Marcus' focus shifted to his next major challenge, Hawkins Group themselves. Richard Hastings and the other conspirators might be out of the picture for now, but the real threat still loomed large. He needed to make sure that Hawkins Group couldn't get any further foothold in the market. The best way to do that? Hit them where it hurt. Tasha, I need you to start gathering information on Hawkins Group's key executives. We'll do a full-scale press attack on them. They can't just make deals in the shadows anymore. We'll bring their tactics to light and show the world exactly how they operate. Tasha raised an eyebrow. Are you sure we're ready for that? They'll have their PR teams working overtime to counter whatever we throw at them. Marcus' eyes glinted with resolve. We've already got the upper hand. We expose everything. Their dirty dealings, their backroom politics, everything. If we start with their board, their investors, we'll have them on the defensive. And once they're on the defensive, we control the narrative. The next day, Marcus stood in front of a camera crew at the Sterling Hotel's headquarters, ready to make the biggest statement of his life. He'd called a press conference, and the eyes of the world were now on him. The moment had come. Good morning, everyone, Marcus began, his voice calm but powerful. Thank you for joining me today. I'm here to speak about an issue that has affected not just Sterling Hotels, but the entire hospitality industry. Recently, it came to light that a group of individuals within my company, alongside executives from Hawkins Group, had been working to undermine the success of Sterling Hotels. They tried to sabotage our operations, betray the trust of our employees, and take over our company. But today, I want to make one thing clear, their efforts will not succeed. The cameras flashed, and the reporters scribbled notes. Marcus could feel the weight of their attention, but he stood tall, unwavering. We've exposed the truth. We've already severed ties with Hawkins Group, and we are taking legal action against every individual involved. But we're not stopping there. Sterling Hotels stands for something bigger than just business. It stands for innovation, inclusion, and respect for everyone who walks through our doors. And we will not let anyone, no matter how powerful they are, take that away from us. The press conference sent shockwaves through the industry. The news outlets picked up the story immediately, and within hours, headlines began to surface across the country. Hawkins Group had been publicly accused of underhanded dealings and corporate espionage. The public opinion quickly began to turn, and Hawkins Group was forced to respond. But Marcus wasn't waiting around. He and Tasha were already putting their next steps in motion. They couldn't afford to be complacent. Hawkins Group would be looking for any opportunity to strike back. As Marcus sat back in his office later that evening, watching the fallout from the press conference unfold, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. He had taken control of the situation, confronted the betrayal head-on, and turned it into a strength. But there was still more to be done. Hawkins Group was a formidable opponent, and he couldn't afford to relax. This battle was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt like he was finally in charge. And this time, he wasn't going to lose. The weeks following Marcus's press conference were a whirlwind of press coverage, strategic meetings, and late-night discussions with his team. Sterling Hotels was under attack from all sides, but Marcus knew that it was just the beginning. Every victory came with a new threat. Hawkins Group was reeling from the exposure, but Marcus also knew they were not the type to back down easily. He wasn't naive enough to believe that their retaliation wouldn't come. The retaliation came sooner than Marcus expected. It was late on a Friday evening when Tasha entered Marcus's office, her face grim. The soft hum of the office lights and the clicking of the keyboard were the only sounds in the otherwise quiet room. Marcus, sitting with his legs crossed and his arms folded, looked up from the financial report in front of him. He could tell from Tasha's expression that something was wrong. "We've got a problem," she said, her voice calm but with an undertone of urgency. "They've already started attacking our revenue streams." Marcus set the report down, his gaze never leaving her. "How?" Tasha handed him a tablet, displaying the latest news. The headline read, "Sterling Hotels hit with unforeseen lawsuits and corporate scandals." His heart sank as he scrolled through the article. Several clients had filed lawsuits, accusing Sterling Hotels of breaching contracts, failing to provide agreed-upon services, and even manipulating prices. It didn't stop there. Financial analysts were now questioning the viability of the company's operations, citing these discrepancies as potential signs of a deeper problem within the company. Hawkins Group did this? Marcus's voice was tight with disbelief. Tasha nodded. "I don't have full confirmation yet, but the timing is too perfect. This is exactly the kind of tactic they would use. They're trying to chip away at our reputation, one lawsuit at a time. If they can create enough doubt about our credibility, they can drive investors away." Marcus's mind raced. It was one thing to expose them, but now, they were coming after him from every angle, using his own company's vulnerabilities against him. "Get me everything on these lawsuits. I want to know who's behind them, where they're coming from, and how deep this goes." The following days were a blur of legal meetings and frantic calls to his PR team, working to handle the fallout from the lawsuits. Hawkins Group was pulling every string they had, using their network of lawyers and media contacts to mount a full-scale attack on Sterling Hotels. But Marcus wasn't going to let this slide. He had been pushed too far, and now it was time to hit back, harder than ever. Marcus sat in a high-rise conference room with Tasha and their top legal team, their faces illuminated by the glow of laptops and phones. Everyone was deep into their research, sifting through contracts, depositions, and public records to find the connections between the lawsuits and Hawkins Group. "I found something," Tasha said, looking up from her screen. She held up a folder, and Marcus could see that her eyes were alight with something different than the usual urgency. This time, it was something close to excitement. "What did you find?" Tasha handed him the folder, and Marcus's eyes scanned over the information quickly. It didn't take long before his blood ran cold. There, in black and white, was undeniable proof that the lawsuits were linked directly to companies under Hawkins Group's influence. The law firms representing the plaintiffs were all linked to Hawkins, either through direct ownership or financial ties. This was their move, all right. A full-scale corporate assassination attempt. "We've got them," Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. "We know exactly who's behind this." Tasha nodded. "We're going to take this to the press. But we need to prepare ourselves for the backlash. Hawkins Group won't just lie down. They'll try to spin this, and they'll try to bring down whoever is standing in their way." Marcus's jaw clenched. Hawkins Group was ruthless, and they had already shown they would stop at nothing to tear him down. But he had one advantage now, the truth. "We go public with it. And we make sure everyone knows exactly what they're trying to do," Marcus declared. The next morning, Marcus held another press conference. His team had gathered every shred of evidence, and now it was time to take the gloves off. He stood at the podium, the flashing cameras almost blinding him, but he didn't flinch. This time, there would be no hesitation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice steady, "I stand before you today not just as the CEO of Sterling Hotels, but as a man who refuses to allow a corrupt corporate giant to take down everything we've worked for. Hawkins Group, through a series of fabricated lawsuits and legal attacks, has launched a smear campaign against us. But today, I'm here to expose their tactics for what they truly are, an attempt to destroy an independent company that values integrity and trust above all else." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The room was silent as everyone hung on to his every syllable. "We've gathered irrefutable proof that the law firms behind these frivolous lawsuits are directly tied to Hawkins Group. This is not a coincidence. They are using their influence to try and ruin Sterling Hotels. But we will not be intimidated. We will not back down. We fought hard to build this company, and will fight even harder to protect it." The reporters began shouting questions, but Marcus wasn't finished. "I'm taking this to the courts. I'm going after Hawkins Group for defamation, corporate sabotage, and malicious intent. We won't just defend ourselves, we're going to expose their corruption to the world." The room erupted with questions, but Marcus stayed calm, answering as best as he could. The evidence was clear, and he had made his move. The media would cover this, and the public would know the truth. The aftermath of the press conference was swift. Hawkins Group immediately issued a statement denying the allegations, calling Marcus's claims a desperate attempt to deflect attention from their company's ongoing legal and financial difficulties. But Marcus wasn't concerned with their spin. He had already taken the necessary steps to protect Sterling Hotels from the full weight of the backlash. He knew this battle wouldn't be over until he had delivered a final blow. He would use every tool at his disposal, his legal team, his media contacts, and his influence in the business world, to ensure that Hawkins Group couldn't touch him or his company again. But it wasn't just about the company anymore. This was personal. A week later, Marcus received an unexpected call. It was from Victor, the former VP of operations who had been part of the original betrayal. Marcus had assumed Victor was out of the picture for good, but now, he was back. "I know what you're doing, Marcus," Victor said over the phone, his voice cold and unrelenting. "You think you can take down Hawkins Group. But you're wrong. You're just a pawn in a game much bigger than you can understand." Marcus clenched his jaw, but he didn't let his anger get the best of him. "What's your angle, Victor? Come crawling back to Hawkins now that your little scheme's been exposed." "I didn't just work with Hawkins Group," Victor said, his voice lowering. "I was their inside man. You're going to wish you never crossed me." The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone for a moment, his mind racing. Victor's return meant that the fight was about to get even uglier. Hawkins Group wasn't just going to back down. They were going to fight with everything they had. But Marcus was ready. He wasn't about to lose everything he had fought for, not now, not ever. Marcus sat at the head of the sleek, glass conference table in Sterling Hotel's boardroom. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Despite the intimidating skyline surrounding him, Marcus felt a calm resolve. The days of being blindsided were over. He had taken the fight to Hawkins Group, and now it was time to prepare for the final stages of battle. He leaned forward, his fingers drumming lightly on the tabletop. The weight of the next decision bore down on him. Hawkins Group wasn't done. He had dealt with their initial retaliation, but he knew they were waiting for the perfect moment to strike back with everything they had. They weren't just attacking his company, they were attacking his character, his legacy. And Marcus wasn't the type to let anyone take that away. He turned his attention to Tasha, who was seated across from him, her laptop open and papers neatly arranged in front of her. She had been his most trusted ally throughout the whole ordeal, and her steady hand had guided the company through the darkest moments. But this was different. This time, the fight was personal. The walls were closing in, and Marcus could feel the pressure mounting with every passing day. "Tasha, what's the latest?" Marcus asked, his voice firm, but with a touch of impatience. Tasha looked up from her screen and met his gaze. "We've compiled everything we need. Our legal team has reviewed the lawsuits, and we've found inconsistencies in the evidence they've presented. Some of the accusations are outright fabricated. The timing of these legal actions is too perfect, it all points back to Hawkins Group pulling the strings." Marcus nodded. "Good. I want to make sure we've got a watertight case. I don't want anything slipping through the cracks." Tasha paused, her expression hardening. "There's something else you need to know. Victor, he's been reaching out to some of our former employees. We think he's trying to gather support from within. If he's successful, he might try to sabotage us from the inside." Marcus's mind raced. Victor was no mere pawn in this war. He was dangerous, calculating, and he knew Sterling Hotels inside and out. If he was trying to rally support, Marcus needed to act fast. "Can we find out who he's talking to?" Marcus asked, already thinking through the steps. "We're working on it. We've already put our internal network on high alert. But Victor knows how to cover his tracks." "This won't be easy," Tasha responded. Marcus's fingers tightened around the armrests of his chair. He hated being on the defensive. This wasn't just about corporate strategy anymore, it was about protecting everything he had built. Sterling Hotels wasn't just a business. It was a testament to his vision, his resilience, and his refusal to let anyone define his success. "Then we need to step up our game," Marcus said, his voice growing more resolute. "I want to make sure we have eyes on every department. We'll root out any traitors before they have a chance to do damage. But we also need to keep the pressure on Hawkins Group. They've made their move. Now it's our turn." The next few days were a blur of strategy sessions and high-stakes decisions. Marcus's legal team filed their countersuits, using the evidence they'd uncovered to expose the corrupt practices of Hawkins Group. Press releases went out, detailing the fraudulent lawsuits and the orchestrated smear campaign. Marcus's PR team worked tirelessly to counter the negative media spin, ensuring that Sterling Hotels remained in the public eye in a positive light. But the deeper they dug into Hawkins Group's operations, the more they discovered. Marcus was disturbed to learn just how far Hawkins Group was willing to go to destroy him. They weren't just attacking Sterling Hotels' finances or reputation. They were pulling strings in the highest levels of government and business, making it clear that they were willing to use any means necessary to regain control. As the media storm raged on, Marcus knew he needed to find a way to shift the tide. The public was watching, but so were his investors, his employees, and his rivals. One wrong move could be catastrophic. That's when Tasha came to him with a suggestion. "Marcus," she said, her voice low but determined. "I've been thinking about how we can take this fight to the next level. We've been on the defensive for too long. It's time we turned the tables." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" "We need to expose Hawkins Group for what they really are. They've tried to tear us apart using their power and influence, but they're not invincible. We can go public with their ties to illegal business practices, money laundering, bribery, the works. We can paint them as the true villains in this story, not just someone who's trying to bring us down." Marcus stared at her, considering the idea. Hawkins Group had built their empire by playing by their own rules. But now, they had met someone who wasn't afraid to expose their dark side. He felt a thrill of anticipation. "Do it," Marcus said, his voice sharp. "Make sure we've got everything in place before we go public. I want the press to know exactly who's behind this attack on our company. We need to hit them where it hurts." Tasha nodded, already working on the details. She knew this was going to be a dangerous move, but Marcus's trust in her was unwavering. If they were going to win this fight, they had to take risks. And in the world of high-stakes business, sometimes those risks were the only way to level the playing field. That evening, Marcus received a call from an unexpected source, Detective Mitchell, the police officer he had worked with during the earlier investigations into Hawkins Group. Mitchell had been keeping tabs on the situation, and Marcus knew that anything coming from him would be worth hearing. "Marcus, I've got something you need to know," Mitchell said, his voice urgent. "We've been looking into Victor, and we've found some disturbing connections. He's been working with someone inside Hawkins Group to leverage your company's downfall. But it gets worse. He's been involved in illegal activity, embezzlement, insider trading, and he's got a few dirty secrets of his own. If you can expose this, it will give you a serious advantage." Marcus felt a wave of anger rise within him, but he kept his voice steady. "I knew he was dangerous. Tell me everything you've got." Mitchell gave him the details, explaining how Victor had been siphoning funds from Sterling hotels and using his position to manipulate financial records. The connection between him and Hawkins Group was undeniable. Victor had been playing both sides all along, and now his betrayal would be their greatest weapon. The following week, Marcus met with his legal and PR teams, finalizing their plan. Victor's illegal activities were revealed to the public, and the press was quick to pick up on it. Sterling Hotels had uncovered another layer of corruption, one that was far more personal and far more damaging than anything Hawkins Group had done. The media exploded with the news. The press labeled Victor as a traitor, someone who had been manipulating the very company he had helped build. Hawkins Group couldn't distance themselves from Victor fast enough, but the damage was already done. Their involvement in Victor's criminal actions was clear, and the public's perception of them started to shift. The backlash against Hawkins Group grew exponentially. The lawsuits against Sterling Hotels lost their momentum, as investors and clients realized that the smear campaign had been orchestrated by a company with its own skeletons in the closet. Marcus's counterattack had been successful. As Marcus sat back in his office, watching the media coverage unfold, he allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. He had taken control of the narrative, turned the tables, and exposed Hawkins Group for the corrupt enterprise they truly were. But this wasn't over yet. Hawkins Group would retaliate again. They were too powerful to back down so easily. The war wasn't won. Not yet. But for the first time in a long time, Marcus knew one thing for sure: he was winning. Marcus sat in his office, the soft glow of the desk lamp casting a warm light over the documents sprawled before him. The hum of the city below seemed distant now. Everything felt like it had been building up to this moment. His eyes narrowed as he reviewed the latest intelligence from his legal and PR teams. It was official: Hawkins Group had been exposed on multiple fronts. Victor was just the beginning. Now, Marcus needed to decide what came next. There was a shift in the air. He had spent months defending himself, fighting back against a juggernaut that wanted to crush him, and yet, he hadn't struck the final blow. Not yet. But the momentum was on his side now, and he wasn't going to waste it. Hawkins Group was reeling, and this was the perfect moment to capitalize on their weakness. The following morning, Marcus held a meeting with his top executives: Tasha, James, the COO, and Lena, the head of public relations. The room was tense as everyone settled in. Marcus could feel the weight of the conversation bearing down on them all. They were no longer talking about mere corporate strategy. This was a war for survival. "We've got them on the ropes," Marcus began, his voice calm but with an undeniable edge. "But I know they're not going to give up. Hawkins Group won't back down quietly. They'll regroup, reassess, and come at us with something even more vicious. The key now is to strike before they can." Tasha, always the strategist, looked up from her laptop. "We've made significant progress with the media. They're starting to turn on Hawkins Group, but we need something more, something that will make it clear they're the ones with the skeletons in their closet." Marcus thought for a moment. He had already exposed Victor, but it was clear that Hawkins Group was too entrenched in their own network to go down easily. It wasn't enough to just expose their corruption, Marcus needed to break them. He needed to take out their foundation and leave them scrambling. "We go deeper," Marcus said with quiet conviction. "It's time we target their financial dealings. We have the power now to dig into their offshore accounts, their illegal acquisitions, the things they think are hidden in the shadows. We have to go after their money." Lena, who had been silent up until now, spoke up. "We have to be careful, though. If we go too far, we risk looking like we're taking cheap shots. We need solid evidence that's undeniable. If we go public with this, it needs to be airtight." Marcus nodded in agreement. "I'm not talking about just rumors or speculation. We need facts. I want a full audit of their operations. We know they're involved in laundering money through their international investments. Let's put together a team to follow the paper trail." Days turned into a flurry of activity as Sterling Hotels began digging deeper into Hawkins Group's operations. Marcus had a specialized team of forensic accountants, private investigators, and legal experts combing through everything: contracts, financial statements, banking records, anything that could connect Hawkins Group to their illicit activities. Meanwhile, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Victor was still lurking somewhere in the shadows, watching every move. His betrayal had cut deep, but it had also made Marcus more vigilant. He wasn't just dealing with a corporate rival anymore. He was fighting a war against enemies who played dirty and had no problem using underhanded tactics to get what they wanted. One evening, Tasha stormed into Marcus's office, her face pale. Marcus looked up, sensing the urgency. "What happened?" he asked, his pulse quickening. Tasha slammed a manila folder onto his desk. "We found it. They're laundering millions through a series of shell companies in the Cayman Islands. The paper trail is clean, too clean. Whoever's handling their accounts knows exactly how to cover their tracks." Marcus grabbed the folder, flipping through the documents. Every page seemed to lead to another layer of corruption, another thread that connected Hawkins Group to global criminal activity. This was bigger than he'd imagined. The further he dug, the clearer it became: Hawkins Group wasn't just a corporate giant, they were the puppeteers behind much of the world's financial underworld. "We've got them," Marcus said, a smirk playing on his lips. But there was no joy in it. This wasn't about victory anymore, it was about survival. If he exposed this, the ramifications would ripple through every industry, and the fallout would be catastrophic. Tasha raised an eyebrow. "Are we really going to do this? Expose everything?" Marcus met her gaze, his decision final. "Yes. We go public with this, and we bring them down once and for all. It's the only way to ensure they can never hurt us, or anyone else, again." The next day, Marcus called an emergency press conference. The press had been on edge, watching the ongoing war between Sterling Hotels and Hawkins Group, waiting for the next move. Marcus knew this would be the defining moment. The evidence was irrefutable. Hawkins Group had used its influence to launder money, fund illegal ventures, and manipulate entire markets. The world would now know the truth. As the cameras flashed and the reporters crowded around, Marcus took his place at the podium. The tension in the room was palpable. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice steady but unwavering, "I stand before you today with irrefutable evidence that Hawkins Group has been laundering money through a series of shell companies, engaging in criminal activity that spans the globe. They have manipulated international markets, evaded taxes, and used their power to control governments. This is not just corporate misconduct. This is a criminal enterprise." The room erupted into chaos. Reporters shouted questions, but Marcus continued, undeterred. "We've collected evidence of their illegal transactions, the money they've funneled through offshore accounts. We've uncovered everything. And we are taking it to the authorities. The world deserves to know the truth. Hawkins Group has been operating in the shadows for far too long. For the next few days, the world watched in shock as the full scope of Hawkins Group's corruption was laid bare. Governments, financial institutions, and law enforcement agencies scrambled to respond to the bombshell revelations. The media couldn't get enough of the scandal, and Marcus had turned the tide in a way that no one could have anticipated. But Hawkins Group wasn't going to go down quietly. The retaliation came quickly. Lawyers representing the conglomerate filed motions for defamation, and smear campaigns launched against Marcus and Sterling Hotels. But this time, Marcus was ready. He had anticipated their next move. While they were scrambling to salvage their reputation, Marcus and his team worked tirelessly behind the scenes, gathering even more evidence to reinforce their claims. The public wasn't backing down. They were demanding justice, and Marcus had already set the wheels of accountability in motion. 2 weeks later, Marcus found himself facing a different kind of pressure. The legal storm from Hawkins Group was only growing. They had hired the best defense attorneys money could buy, and they were doing everything in their power to discredit Marcus and his claims. The battle in the courts would be long and grueling. But Marcus was no stranger to adversity. He knew the stakes had never been higher. This wasn't just about business anymore, this was about proving a point. No matter how powerful they were, no matter how deep their pockets ran, Marcus was going to make sure Hawkins Group paid for their transgressions. And this time, he wasn't just fighting for his company. He was fighting for justice. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The courthouse loomed in the distance, its stone columns cold and imposing, an architectural symbol of power and justice. Marcus Sterling stood before it, feeling a familiar tension in his chest. He had dealt with corporate battles, boardroom disputes, and high-stakes decisions for years, but today felt different. This was personal. This was the culmination of months of strategy, deceit, and relentless pursuit. This was the moment he would either claim victory or see it slip through his fingers. Behind him, the media frenzy was already in full swing. Flashbulbs popped like firecrackers as reporters shouted questions, trying to catch even the slightest glimpse of Sterling Hotel's CEO. The stakes were higher than ever before. Hawkins Group had retaliated aggressively, launching an all-out legal offensive to discredit Marcus, claiming he had fabricated evidence and orchestrated a smear campaign. But Marcus wasn't backing down. Not now. Not after everything he had sacrificed. Inside the courthouse, the air was thick with anticipation. Marcus sat in a quiet conference room, his legal team surrounding him. Tasha, ever the rock, sat by his side, her eyes scanning the papers spread out before them. James, his COO, was on the phone, coordinating with their public relations team to manage the onslaught of media requests. The tension was palpable. Every move they made had to be precise. One misstep, and everything could fall apart. "We've got them, Marcus," Tasha said quietly, looking up from the pile of legal briefs. "Our team has been working overtime to make sure the evidence is airtight. We've traced Hawkins Group's money laundering operations to multiple shell companies, and the paper trail is undeniable." Marcus nodded. "I want to make sure we're ready for anything. They'll try to discredit us, to confuse the jury. We need to hit them with everything we've got. No mistakes." "I've got it covered," Tasha reassured him, her confidence steadying his nerves. "The prosecution is on our side, and the FBI's already involved. It's only a matter of time before the truth comes out." Marcus leaned back in his chair, rubbing the back of his neck. The weight of the situation pressed down on him. He had faced countless challenges in his career, but this was different. The future of Sterling Hotels hung in the balance, but so did his reputation, his legacy. It was no longer just about business. This was a battle for the soul of his company. Hours later, the courtroom doors opened, and the trial began. Marcus entered with Tasha at his side, flanked by his top attorneys. Victor's betrayal, the illegal activities of Hawkins' group, and the countless sleepless nights they had spent preparing for this moment all led up to this. He was calm, but inside, his heart raced. This was his chance to bring the fight to them. The courtroom was filled with the hum of hushed conversations and the clinking of coffee cups as everyone took their seats. The defense team for Hawkins' group, led by the formidable Clara Lancaster, was already in position. Clara was known for her sharp intellect and ruthless tactics. Marcus had encountered her before in boardrooms, and he knew she would be a worthy adversary. As the judge entered, the room quieted. The trial had begun. The first day of testimony went by quickly, with both sides presenting their initial arguments. Clara Lancaster wasted no time launching her attacks, accusing Marcus of creating false accusations against Hawkins' group to divert attention from his own business failures. She painted him as a desperate CEO trying to cover up his company's shortcomings by framing a much larger, more powerful rival. Marcus sat stone-faced, listening intently as she tried to undermine his credibility. She was skilled at twisting facts, at making everything seem like an elaborate game of smoke and mirrors. But Marcus had no intention of letting her narrative take root. The truth was on his side, and he wasn't going to let her bury it. When it was his turn to speak, Marcus stood tall, his voice steady and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the evidence we've presented is not fiction. It's the truth. Hawkins' group has been engaging in illegal activities for years, activities that have hurt not only my company but also countless others. Money laundering, market manipulation, and fraudulent practices. I'm here today not just to protect my business, but to ensure that justice is done." The courtroom was silent as his words hung in the air. Marcus had delivered his message with clarity, and for the first time in weeks, he felt like he was on solid ground. The days dragged on, each filled with back-and-forth testimony, cross-examinations, and moments of intense focus. Clara Lancaster fought back fiercely, trying to discredit every piece of evidence Marcus's team presented. She used every legal maneuver in the book to muddy the waters, but the cracks in Hawkins' group's defense were beginning to show. But Marcus knew the real bombshell was yet to come. Tasha had been working behind the scenes with a team of investigators, gathering further evidence to push the case over the edge. Marcus had been waiting for the right moment to drop the final truth bomb. The following week, after several more rounds of testimony, the moment finally arrived. Tasha walked into the conference room where Marcus was reviewing case files, a folder clutched tightly in her hand. She didn't need to say anything. The look on her face told him everything he needed to know. "We've got it," Tasha said quietly, her voice tinged with satisfaction. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Tasha opened the folder and slid a set of documents across the table. It was the final piece of the puzzle. Hawkins' group had attempted to funnel money through their offshore accounts not only to evade taxes but also to fund criminal organizations involved in illegal arms deals and human trafficking. Marcus's stomach turned as he scanned the documents. This was beyond anything he had expected. The depth of their corruption was staggering. It wasn't just money laundering. They were involved in global criminal activities. "We'll bring this to court tomorrow," Tasha said, her voice steely. "It's over." Marcus nodded, his heart racing. He had no idea how Clara Lancaster was going to spin this one. There was no denying the weight of this revelation. Hawkins' group had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The next morning, the courtroom buzzed with nervous energy as the final day of the trial approached. The press was in full force, their cameras flashing as they caught every detail. The final testimonies were being prepared, and Marcus could feel the weight of the moment. When it was time, Marcus rose from his seat, and Tasha followed close behind. The evidence they were about to present would be damning. They had the truth, and they had the world's attention. This was his moment. Marcus stood before the jury and the judge, his voice unwavering as he presented the final pieces of evidence. He watched as Clara Lancaster's confident demeanor began to crack. She tried to regain control, but it was too late. The truth was out. The following days were a whirlwind of media coverage, public statements, and legal proceedings. The revelation of Hawkins Group's global criminal activity made headlines around the world. The financial community, law enforcement agencies, and governments were all scrambling to respond to the massive scandal. For once, Hawkins Group was the one under siege, and Marcus was the one who had exposed them. As the court deliberated, Marcus felt a sense of satisfaction, though the weight of the battle still hung over him. There was no going back. The storm had passed, but the reckoning was far from over. He had taken down a giant, but he knew it wasn't the end. There would always be more battles ahead. The days after the final presentation in court felt like a blur. For once, Marcus allowed himself to breathe, though the tension still hung in the air, like a storm waiting to break. It was surreal, he could almost taste the victory that was so close, but it didn't quite feel like a win. Not yet. The fight was still ongoing. Hawkins Group was not going to roll over and accept defeat, not without one last desperate move. Marcus had made his mark. He had outsmarted them, exposed their darkest secrets, and now it was time for the world to see the full extent of Hawkins Group's corruption. He wasn't just fighting for his company anymore, he was fighting to restore his legacy, to take down an empire built on deceit and manipulation. But no empire, no matter how powerful, could remain unchallenged forever. The court was now in deliberation. The judge had given both sides time to present their closing arguments. Marcus had already done everything in his power to make sure the evidence was overwhelming, but the defense had tried to turn every piece of evidence into a shadow of doubt. It was clear, they were grasping at straws. As Marcus sat in his office later that evening, he reflected on the last few months. He thought about how far he had come, about the struggle, the long nights, and the endless battle to protect sterling hotels. He'd lost friends, allies, and even parts of his own integrity in the process. But in the end, it was all worth it. The price of success had always been steep, but now, with Hawkins Group crumbling, Marcus could finally see a light at the end of the tunnel. But then came the phone call that nearly knocked him off his feet. It was Tasha, her voice shaky and urgent. "Marcus, we need to talk," she said. "Something's happened. The FBI's raided the bank accounts. They found something big, something that we didn't know about before. It's all connected to you." Marcus froze. Tasha was one of the most level-headed people he knew. For her to sound this rattled, something was wrong. "What do you mean, connected to me? What did they find?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "I don't know yet," she replied, "but they're investigating. And they've pulled some of our files. They're digging into your personal accounts, Marcus. They're looking into your overseas investments and—" A cold chill ran through Marcus as he heard her words. Could Hawkins Group have planted something to frame him? It seemed too far-fetched, but given the nature of the battle they'd been fighting, anything was possible. If this was a trap, Marcus knew he couldn't afford to fall into it. "I'll be there," Marcus said firmly. "Get me everything you have. Now." That night, Marcus's world was rocked in a way he hadn't anticipated. As the investigation into his finances deepened, more questions arose. The FBI had traced several payments from Hawkins Group to an offshore company in the Virgin Islands, payments that had been funneled through Marcus's own accounts. The documents were all in order, but the sheer volume of transactions suggested something far more complicated than a simple oversight. For the first time since this whole battle began, Marcus felt the weight of uncertainty pressing on him. He had always been ahead of the game, always one step ahead of his enemies, but now the tables had turned. The evidence suggested that someone was trying to frame him, to take down his empire. The next morning, Marcus walked into his office, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He had trusted Victor, believed in his integrity, but now, it seemed that the entire system they had built was falling apart. The more Marcus thought about it, the more it became clear, Victor was the link. He had been the one orchestrating everything from the inside. But Marcus had never been able to put the pieces together until now. Victor had always been the shadow, lurking in the background, pulling strings behind the scenes. The idea that Victor had set him up was terrifying, but at the same time, it made perfect sense. Marcus called for an emergency meeting with his top executives, including Tasha, James, and Lena. When they arrived, he could see the concern etched on their faces. They were all aware of the mounting pressure, but no one knew the full extent of what had just come to light. "We need to talk," Marcus began, his voice calm but with an edge of steel. "Hawkins Group is trying to take me down. They've planted evidence in my accounts, and it looks like Victor has been behind it all." Tasha raised an eyebrow. "But Victor was your most trusted advisor. Why would he?" Marcus cut her off. "Because Victor is just as corrupt as they are. We've been played, all of us. He's been feeding information to Hawkins Group, manipulating us from the inside. And now, they've set me up." The revelation hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He had trusted Victor, treated him like family. And now, it was all unraveling. The betrayal ran deeper than he had ever imagined. But Marcus knew what he had to do. He would expose Victor for the fraud he was. He would take back control of his company and ensure that Hawkins Group paid for everything they had done. The final battle was on the horizon. But this time, Marcus wasn't just fighting for his company. He was fighting for his own redemption. The tension was unbearable. Marcus had felt the weight of every decision, every betrayal, and every sleepless night leading up to this moment. But nothing had prepared him for what was coming next. He had uncovered Victor's betrayal, the final piece of the puzzle that would bring everything crashing down. But now the real battle had begun. The stakes were higher than ever, and Marcus knew that every move he made from here on out would determine not only the future of Sterling Hotels but his freedom and his legacy. Marcus sat in his office, staring out of the window, the city skyline stretching before him. The sunlight bounced off the glass buildings, reflecting the chaos of his life. Victor's betrayal felt like a personal gut punch, but there was no time for grief. Marcus had to be sharp. He had to be strategic. His phone buzzed on the desk. It was Tasha. He answered quickly. "Marcus, we've got something," her voice was firm but tinged with urgency. "I need you in the conference room. Now." Marcus stood, the weight of what was to come bearing down on him. This was it. This was where it all came together, or fell apart. In the conference room, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Tasha, James, and Lena were already seated, their faces a mix of determination and concern. A large screen displayed a digital map of the financial transactions that had been uncovered. Victor's fingerprints were all over it, every shady deal, every offshore account, every fraudulent transaction. The more Marcus looked at the screen, the more he felt sick to his stomach. Victor had been playing him all along, like a puppet master pulling the strings from behind the scenes. "We've traced Victor's involvement even further," Tasha said, pointing to the screen. "Not only did he orchestrate these transactions, but we've discovered that he had a direct hand in manipulating the stock market, using Sterling Hotels as a vehicle for his own gain. He was siphoning millions from the company while feeding information to Hawkins Group." Marcus' jaw clenched. He had trusted Victor with everything. He was his right-hand man, the person who had been with him from the very beginning, through the highs and lows of building Sterling Hotels. And now, Victor had not only betrayed him but had endangered everything they had worked for. "We need to make this public," Lena said, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "Expose Victor for what he truly is. The truth will crush him, and once that happens, Hawkins Group will have no choice but to fold." Marcus shook his head, his mind racing. "We can't just drop this all at once. The media will eat it up, and Victor will spin it into something else. We need to hit him where it hurts, his credibility, his reputation. We need to strip him of everything. James chimed in. We've got the FBI already involved, Marcus. The moment we release this, it's not just about reputation. It's a criminal case. Victor will be facing charges that will destroy him. Marcus paused, thinking carefully. This wasn't just a matter of business anymore, it was personal. Victor had turned against him, trying to tear down everything Marcus had built. The pain of betrayal was sharp, but Marcus knew what had to be done. We can't wait any longer, Marcus said finally, his voice cold with resolve. We go public today. And we bring Victor down, along with Hawkins' group. No mercy. Later that afternoon, Marcus stood in front of a large media crowd in a press conference room. The atmosphere was tense, the cameras flashing as reporters scrambled for their questions. His heart raced, but his face remained impassive. The room was filled with anticipation, everyone could feel the weight of what was about to be revealed. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus began, his voice clear and firm. I stand before you today not only as the CEO of Sterling Hotels but as a man who has been wronged. A man who has been betrayed by someone he trusted. For months, we've been fighting against Hawkins Group, a company that sought to destroy us with lies, manipulation, and corruption. But today, I stand here to tell you the truth. A truth that will change everything. The room fell silent. Through an exhaustive investigation, Marcus continued, we have uncovered the full extent of the corruption within Hawkins Group. But that's not all. One of the key figures in this entire scheme, someone I once trusted completely, has been working against us from the inside. His name is Victor Ford, my former COO. He has been feeding Hawkins Group confidential information, siphoning funds from Sterling Hotels, and using our company as a vehicle for his own illicit financial gain. We have the evidence to prove it. A gasp rippled through the room as the reporters scrambled to process the bombshell Marcus had just dropped. Marcus didn't stop there. I have given the authorities full access to our internal records, and the FBI has already launched a full investigation. Victor will face charges for his actions, and he will be held accountable for his betrayal. But the truth doesn't end with him. Hawkins Group will be exposed for the criminal organization they truly are. We will fight to the end to make sure justice is served. The fallout was immediate and intense. News outlets around the world picked up the story. Headlines screamed about Victor's betrayal, the massive corporate fraud, and the illegal activities that had been hidden behind closed doors. The public was stunned. Hawkins Group was on the defensive, scrambling to respond to the charges. But the damage had already been done. Their empire was crumbling, and they had no one but themselves to blame. Meanwhile, Victor was nowhere to be found. The authorities had issued a warrant for his arrest, but he had vanished, taking everything he could with him. Marcus had known he wouldn't go down without a fight, but Victor's disappearance only made the case more damning. It was clear that he had known the walls were closing in. The legal battles were far from over, but the war had already shifted in Marcus's favor. With Victor exposed and Hawkins Group under investigation, Sterling Hotels had regained its footing. Marcus had taken back control, not only of his company but of his destiny. But the victory felt hollow. Despite everything, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to be uncovered. The investigation into Victor and Hawkins Group was still ongoing, and Marcus knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But he was ready. He had faced the storm, and now he was prepared to face whatever came next. As Marcus sat in his office that evening, looking out over the city, he knew that the battle was far from over. Sterling Hotels was safe, for now. But he had learned something valuable through all of this: trust was a fragile thing. Betrayal could come from anywhere, and when it did, it could destroy everything. But Marcus wasn't afraid. He had built this empire from the ground up, and he would rebuild it again if necessary. He would never let anyone take it from him. He had learned the hard way that in business, and in life, nothing could be taken for granted. But as long as he had the strength to fight, he would never stop fighting for what was his. The final showdown was over, but the story was far from finished. The road ahead would be long, but Marcus was ready. He had come too far to let anything, or anyone, take him down now. The press conference had rocked the business world. Headlines flashed across every news outlet: Marcus Sterling strikes back, the dark truth behind Hawkins Group and his betrayer revealed. The scandal involving Victor Ford had dominated the news cycle, and Marcus had not only exposed the treachery within his own company but also caused a ripple effect that shook the very foundations of corporate America. Despite the initial victory, the aftermath felt less like triumph and more like the silence that follows a storm. Marcus sat alone in his office late into the night, papers and legal documents scattered around him, his thoughts heavy. The adrenaline of the past weeks had worn off, replaced by the exhaustion of a battle that felt like it was never truly over. Victor was gone, and Hawkins Group had been placed under intense scrutiny, but Marcus knew that the worst was far from over. The media was still chewing over every detail, questioning every move he had made, and painting him as either the victim of a massive conspiracy or a mastermind pulling the strings behind it all. Both narratives seemed equally damaging. He was either a weak leader who had been duped or a calculating figure who had orchestrated the entire scheme from the beginning. But the truth, as always, lay somewhere in the middle. Marcus knew he had to focus on what came next: rebuilding Sterling Hotels and restoring the company's reputation. The legal battle with Hawkins Group was just beginning, and he needed to be ready for anything. The following weeks were filled with frantic meetings, urgent calls from lawyers, and strategy sessions with his team. The FBI had launched a full-scale investigation into Victor's activities, and while the trail was already leading to massive financial fraud, the final outcomes were still unclear. The authorities had already found several hidden accounts and assets tied to Victor that painted a clear picture of his betrayal, but Hawkins Group was still not out of the woods. Marcus was determined to ensure that justice was served, no matter the cost. The one silver lining in all of this was the unwavering support he received from his closest allies, Tasha, James, and Lena. They had proven invaluable throughout the investigation, and as much as Marcus wanted to be alone in his thoughts, he knew he couldn't go through this fight without them. Tasha knocked on the door, breaking Marcus's train of thought. She walked in, her face a mix of determination and concern. "We've got another problem," she said, sitting down across from him. "The board wants to talk." Marcus frowned. "The board? Why now?" "They're concerned about the fallout from the Victor scandal. They want to know what's next for the company, and they're pressuring you for a roadmap forward," Tasha explained. Marcus sat back in his chair, massaging his temples. The board had always been a constant presence, but now, in the wake of all this turmoil, their concerns were louder than ever. "They think we're going to lose investors," she continued, "and that this whole thing could jeopardize the future of the company." Marcus nodded, already anticipating their concerns. "We've been through worse before. We've survived when no one thought we could." "I know," she said. "But this time it's different. The public's watching. The reputation of Sterling Hotels is on the line, and we need a strategy to make sure we don't lose everything." Marcus looked at her, the weight of leadership pressing down on him more than ever. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore, he was fighting for everyone who had believed in him, for his employees, for his legacy. He had to win this. "All right," Marcus said, his voice firm. "Let's make it happen. We'll call a board meeting and show them what we're doing to turn things around. But this time, I'm going to make sure that Sterling Hotels comes out of this stronger than ever." The board meeting the next morning was a tense affair. The members of the board, a mix of seasoned executives and investors, sat in front of Marcus, their expressions unreadable. He could feel the pressure mounting, but he refused to let it show. This was his moment to reassure them and, more importantly, to take control of the narrative. "We're not just going to survive this," Marcus began, his voice steady. "We're going to thrive. The Victor Ford scandal, as damaging as it was, has uncovered something important. It's shown us the cracks in the foundation, cracks that we can now fix." The room was silent as Marcus paused, letting his words sink in. "We've already begun restructuring our internal security, strengthening our financial transparency, and reinforcing our relationships with investors. The company is moving forward. And we will not let Hawkins Group, or anyone else, derail us." He could see the board members exchanging glances, some nodding in approval, others still hesitant. But Marcus wasn't about to back down. He had a vision, and now he needed them to see it too. "We're going to focus on rebuilding our brand," Marcus continued. "We'll introduce new initiatives that will set us apart from the competition, and we're going to strengthen our connections with local communities through philanthropic efforts. Sterling Hotels will not just be a brand, it will be a symbol of resilience and integrity. We'll make this company a force to be reckoned with." Finally, after a long pause, one of the board members spoke up. "And you're confident this will work?" "I'm not just confident," Marcus said. "I'm committed." Over the next few weeks, the wheels of recovery began to turn. Marcus and his team worked tirelessly, focused on rebuilding Sterling Hotels from the ground up. The scandal had shaken them, but it also provided an opportunity to reshape the company's future. They launched a new marketing campaign that showcased their commitment to ethical business practices, highlighting the reforms they were making in response to the scandal. They also began reaching out to local communities, partnering with charities, and launching programs that helped the underprivileged. It wasn't just about damage control, it was about creating a new identity for the company, one that stood for something more than just profit. The board, though cautious at first, began to see the progress. Investors, too, started to take notice. While the stock prices were still recovering, there was a renewed sense of confidence in the leadership of Sterling Hotels. The company was beginning to feel like its old self again, but with a new sense of purpose. Despite the progress, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more lurking beneath the surface. The FBI investigation into Victor Ford and Hawkins Group was ongoing, and every day he waited for another bombshell to drop. But for now, he had done all he could to protect the company. It was out of his hands. Still, as Marcus sat in his office one evening, looking out over the city, he felt the weight of everything he had been through. The betrayal, the legal battles, the media circus, it had all taken its toll. But through it all, he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to protect Sterling Hotels. The days following the board meeting had been a whirlwind of activity. The wheels of Sterling Hotels were beginning to turn once more, and Marcus was doing everything in his power to keep the momentum going. The public had absorbed the news of Victor Ford's betrayal, but what they hadn't yet seen was the plan Marcus had laid out to restore the company to its former glory, and beyond. Marcus had learned a harsh lesson through the ordeal, one that would shape how he ran Sterling Hotels moving forward. Trust was not something that could be easily earned and certainly not something that could be taken for granted. And now, as he stood at the crossroads of Sterling's future, he was determined to build a company that wasn't just profitable but also respected, one that would stand as a beacon of integrity in the corporate world. But first, he needed to move past the shadow of Victor Ford. The marketing campaign that Marcus had launched was more than just a PR move, it was an opportunity to redefine what Sterling Hotels stood for. It wasn't just about luxury and profitability anymore, it was about creating an atmosphere of trust, innovation, and resilience. Marcus had long been known for his sharp instincts when it came to business, but this time, it wasn't just his gut he was relying on, it was his deep understanding of what the world had seen in Sterling Hotels before the scandal. People didn't just come for the luxury, they came for the experience, the assurance that when they booked a room or a suite, they were getting something they couldn't find anywhere else. And it was time to bring that back. He met regularly with his marketing team, brainstorming new ways to reach the customers who had felt betrayed by the scandal. His goal was clear, Sterling Hotels would not just recover, but become the industry leader in transparency and customer experience. They would focus on what mattered most, the guest. "We're going to let our customers in on the journey," Marcus said in one of the meetings. "They've seen the ugliness. Now it's time to show them how we're making things right. Every step of the way. The campaign that followed was a resounding success. Ads ran across every major platform, showcasing Sterling's commitment to ethical business practices and community engagement. Social media influencers, once skeptical, were now on board, praising the company's transparency and its commitment to building trust with its clientele. The response was overwhelmingly positive, and soon enough, bookings began to rise again. While the marketing campaign was moving full steam ahead, Marcus knew the internal work was just as important. He'd been forced to dismantle much of the old leadership structure when Victor was exposed, but now it was time to put the pieces back together. Only this time, Marcus wasn't just looking for experience, he was looking for loyalty, for people who shared his vision for a stronger, more ethical company. Tasha, always the right hand in every decision Marcus made, had already begun reaching out to potential candidates who could fill the vacant spots in the senior leadership team. Together, they went through dozens of resumes, interviewed countless candidates, and met with former employees who had stayed loyal to Sterling Hotels even when the company's reputation was in tatters. "We need people who aren't just qualified on paper," Marcus said, staring at a list of potential executives. "We need people who can understand what we've been through and who are ready to move forward with us. People who aren't afraid to roll up their sleeves and help rebuild this company from the ground up." It wasn't easy, but slowly, Marcus began to rebuild his team. He recruited Ava Patterson, a seasoned financial strategist who had a reputation for being tough, but fair. He also brought in Henry Parker, a former VP of operations who had been working at a smaller hotel chain but who had a strong ethical foundation and a track record for successfully turning around struggling companies. With these new leaders, the foundation for the rebirth of Sterling Hotels began to take shape. Amid the restructuring, Marcus received an unexpected call from Lena, the former marketing executive who had left Sterling shortly after the scandal broke. She had been a significant force in the early days of the company's rise and had played a crucial role in crafting the brand's image. Marcus had assumed that after everything that had happened, Lena would never want to return to Sterling Hotels. But he was wrong. "I've been watching everything you've done, Marcus," Lena said, her voice warm but determined. "I see the changes you're making. I see the way you're rebuilding, and I want to be a part of it. You need someone who understands this company inside and out, and I believe I'm the right person to help you with that." Marcus was taken aback but quickly realized that this was the opportunity he needed. Lena's return would be the final piece in putting together a team that could lead Sterling Hotels into a new era. "Come on board," Marcus said. "Help us create a future that people can believe in again." With Lena's expertise, the marketing campaign took an even bolder turn. Her experience in crafting brand narratives played a crucial role in fine-tuning the company's image, not just as a luxury brand, but as a company of integrity. The campaign emphasized customer satisfaction, eco-friendly initiatives, and a commitment to community outreach. This didn't just repair their image, it gave Sterling Hotels an entirely new identity. With the public relations campaign in full swing, the next challenge was stabilizing the finances. The media frenzy around the Victor Ford scandal had caused investors to pull back, and while the recovery efforts were moving quickly, Marcus knew that this was an issue that couldn't be solved overnight. It was Ava Patterson who came up with a comprehensive financial restructuring plan. She proposed a series of targeted investments in key locations where Sterling Hotels had the most potential for growth, while also focusing on cutting unnecessary expenses to help maintain a strong cash flow. They would introduce a new line of smaller boutique hotels under the Sterling brand, aimed at appealing to a younger, more budget-conscious demographic. It was a bold move, but Marcus trusted Ava's judgment. The results of the financial restructuring were immediate. Slowly but surely, the financial landscape of Sterling Hotels began to look healthier. The new boutique hotels began to attract a younger crowd, eager to experience the Sterling brand at a more affordable price. With the financial situation stabilizing, Marcus could finally breathe easier. As the months passed, Marcus could see the transformation taking place within Sterling Hotels. The company was no longer defined by betrayal and scandal, it was defined by its resilience and commitment to rebuilding. The team he had put together, the new initiatives that had been launched, and the positive public response all pointed toward one thing: a new era was dawning for Sterling Hotels. But Marcus knew this wasn't the end. The battle was far from over. There would always be new challenges, new competitors, and new threats on the horizon. But this time, he was ready. Sterling Hotels had survived one of its darkest chapters, and it had emerged stronger, smarter, and more committed to its values than ever before. As he stood on the balcony of the Sterling Tower, looking out at the city he had helped shape, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be long, but it was a road he was determined to travel. He had come too far to let anything, or anyone, take him down again. And with that, he stepped back inside, ready to face whatever the future had in store. Just as Sterling Hotels had started to regain its footing, a new and unexpected threat loomed on the horizon. It wasn't a corporate scandal or an internal betrayal this time, but rather a fierce new competitor, Redwood Hospitality Group, that had entered the luxury hotel market with a vengeance. The CEO, Evan Drake, was young, ambitious, and had a reputation for being a ruthless businessman. His company had launched a series of upscale properties in key markets, positioning themselves as the new standard of excellence in the industry. What made Redwood Hospitality especially dangerous was its aggressive approach, one that seemed tailor-made to take down Sterling Hotels. The first time Marcus heard about Evan Drake, it was in passing. One of his board members, Lyle Harris, had mentioned that Redwood Hospitality was planning to open a flagship hotel right across from Sterling Tower. But as Marcus started to pay attention to Redwood's growth, he realized just how serious the threat was. Evan Drake was no ordinary CEO. He had built Redwood from the ground up, but his methods were nothing short of aggressive. He offered unprecedented perks to high-profile clients, enticing them with luxury services that seemed impossible to match. And his team was not just innovative, they were calculated. Every marketing move seemed perfectly timed, every campaign more effective than the last. "I've been following him," Marcus said one evening as he sat across from Tasha in his office. "He's not here to play games. He's here to win." Tasha nodded, the concern evident on her face. "I've seen the reports. He's offering some serious incentives to attract clients. Free stays, private jets, exclusive events. It's like he's trying to steal the spotlight from Sterling in every way possible. And he's doing it successfully," Marcus added, rubbing his chin. "We need to counter him, but it's not going to be easy." The days that followed were filled with tense strategy meetings. Marcus had always prided himself on his ability to stay ahead of the competition, but this was different. Redwood Hospitality wasn't just a competitor, they were a direct threat to everything he had worked for. The first step was to learn everything he could about Evan Drake and his tactics. Marcus assigned Lena to lead the research efforts, and over the next few days, she compiled a dossier on Drake and his company. The findings were both surprising and alarming. Evan was methodical, yet unpredictable. He was known for offering immense incentives to win over influential clients, and he had poached several high-level employees from other luxury hotel chains to strengthen his management team. The competitive advantage was in his adaptability. Unlike Sterling, which had long relied on brand loyalty and stability, Redwood thrived on disruption. "We need to think beyond the usual. This isn't just about luxury, it's about redefining what it means to stay at a hotel," Marcus said during a brainstorming session with his top team. "I'm not talking about discounts or gimmicks, those won't work in the long run. We need to offer something they can't replicate." James, Marcus's trusted VP of operations, leaned forward, tapping a finger against the table. "We've always prided ourselves on exceptional service and community engagement. But maybe it's time to take that even further. How about we offer personalized experiences that feel more like a lifestyle than just a stay?" Marcus's eyes brightened. "What do you mean?" "Think about it. We could partner with local artists, chefs, and influencers to create exclusive, one-of-a-kind experiences that our guests couldn't get anywhere else. A bespoke culinary tour, private art showcases, or even wellness retreats that combine luxury with personal transformation. It was exactly the kind of idea Marcus was looking for, something that would set Sterling Hotels apart, not just as a place to stay, but as an immersive experience that no one else could offer. The plan was set in motion quickly. Sterling Hotels would rebrand itself not just as a luxury brand, but as a pioneer in experiential luxury. Marcus and his team worked tirelessly to roll out a new series of initiatives aimed at redefining what it meant to stay at one of their hotels. The new tagline, Sterling Hotels, where your journey begins. They started with exclusive pop-up events that took place in their hotels across the country. Lena curated private art exhibitions featuring works from emerging artists, while Tasha secured deals with renowned chefs to host intimate culinary experiences. They began offering personal concierge services that would plan everything from a guest's room decor to private day trips catered to their individual tastes. Each hotel became a reflection of the city it was in, crafted specifically to the interests and desires of the guests. At the same time, Marcus began to personally engage with key influencers and celebrities, offering them bespoke experiences in exchange for authentic feedback and word-of-mouth endorsements. The key to success, he knew, was not to try to beat Redwood hospitality at its own game, but to create a new one entirely. As the months passed, the impact of Sterling's new approach was undeniable. Guests began flocking to the hotels for the unique experiences they couldn't get anywhere else. The exclusive partnerships with local artists and chefs generated buzz across social media, and soon the hotels became hotspots for the social elite. The personalized services, from curated fitness programs to custom-designed rooms, elevated Sterling Hotels to an entirely new level of exclusivity. And yet, despite their success, Marcus couldn't help but keep a close eye on Redwood hospitality. While Sterling was gaining ground, Evan Drake's tactics were still unpredictable, and the threat was far from over. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Marcus found himself alone in his office, staring out at the city skyline. He'd won the first round, but he knew that in the game of high-stakes business, there was always a bigger move coming. That was when his phone buzzed. It was a message from Tasha, "You're not going to believe this. Redwood just offered Victor Ford a new role. He's planning to join them as a senior executive." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The very man who had once betrayed him now found himself in the employ of Evan Drake. Was this a coincidence? Or was Drake playing an even more dangerous game? Marcus took a deep breath. The battle for dominance in the hotel industry was far from over. And with Victor Ford back in play, things were about to get much more complicated. The news of Victor Ford joining Redwood Hospitality hit Marcus like a ton of bricks. The very man who had almost torn Sterling Hotels apart was now in the fold of Evan Drake's empire. The timing couldn't have been more deliberate. Just when Sterling was starting to find its footing, Victor had returned, armed with his vast network, knowledge of Sterling's inner workings, and the experience he had gained during his brief tenure as CEO. Marcus stood by his office window, looking out at the city below. His thoughts raced. What was Victor planning? Was this simply a power play, or was there something more sinister at work? The betrayal from Victor had cut deep, but Marcus knew that as long as he let his emotions guide his decisions, it would cost him everything. "Marcus," Tasha's voice broke through his thoughts. She walked into the office, her expression serious. "We've got intel. Victor Ford is already stirring things up with Evan Drake. He's been making calls, meeting with investors, and trying to steal our clients." Marcus finished her sentence with a grimace. He knew exactly what Victor was up to. This wasn't about helping Redwood grow, it was about revenge. Tasha nodded. "We can't let this go unchecked. If we don't act fast, he could destabilize everything we've worked for." Marcus sighed and turned to face her. "I know. But we can't let him play us again. This time, we have to be smarter, more strategic. Victor knows how to get under my skin. He's going to try to play dirty, and we can't afford to react emotionally. They both stood in silence for a moment, contemplating their next move. Victor had the potential to do a lot of damage. But Marcus wasn't the same man who had been blindsided years ago. He'd been through hell and back. He wasn't going to let a man like Victor Ford bring him down again. Marcus knew that if he was going to protect Sterling Hotels, he couldn't just sit idly by. He needed to act decisively and preemptively. The first step was to anticipate Victor's next move. Marcus wasn't naive, he knew that Victor would go after their high-profile clients first. He'd been the one to cultivate many of those relationships before, and he understood their needs and desires better than most. "We need to lock down our VIP clients," Marcus said, pacing around his office. "Make sure they know that nothing has changed. That Sterling Hotels is still the best place to do business." Tasha took out her tablet and quickly began typing out a plan. "I'll contact Ava to have a special meeting with our most important clients. We'll reinforce our value proposition, emphasize our new experiences, and ensure they know that Sterling is fully committed to providing them with the best service." Marcus nodded in agreement. "Yes. And let's schedule some exclusive events for them. Create those bespoke experiences that we know they won't get anywhere else." As the plan took shape, Marcus felt a surge of determination. He wasn't going to let Victor or Evan Drake steal everything he'd worked so hard for. This time, Marcus would play the game on his terms. Sterling Hotels was his, and no one was going to take that away from him. Weeks passed as Marcus, Tasha, and the rest of the team at Sterling worked tirelessly to ensure the company's survival. The campaign was running smoothly, bookings were steady, and the new experiences were starting to attract attention. But as the weeks went by, Marcus could feel the tension in the air. Victor had been quiet. Too quiet. Then, one day, Marcus received an invitation for a meeting. The sender was none other than Evan Drake. The subject line, "Time for a conversation, Marcus." The message was clear, Evan Drake was ready for a showdown. Victor Ford was in his corner, and together, they were a formidable team. It was time for Marcus to face his greatest adversary head-on. "Are you sure about this?" Tasha asked as Marcus read over the email. "You know they're going to try to undermine everything you've built. This could be their attempt to get inside your head." Marcus looked at her, his jaw set firmly. "I'm not going to hide from them, Tasha. I'm not running. If they think they can intimidate me, they're mistaken. Let's meet them on our terms." The meeting was set for a sleek, modern conference room in one of Redwood Hospitality's newly opened hotels. The location was chosen deliberately, a show of force by Evan Drake. The room was cold and sterile, the glass walls reflecting the power play at work. As Marcus and Tasha entered the room, they were greeted by Evan Drake, who was standing by the window, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. Standing beside him was Victor Ford, whose smile was almost mocking. "Marcus," Evan said smoothly, offering a handshake. "It's good to finally sit down with you." Marcus took the handshake, his grip firm. "Let's get to the point, Evan. I know why we're here." Victor chuckled from beside him. "It's simple, Marcus. We're here to make you an offer. A partnership. You see, Sterling Hotels and Redwood Hospitality could be much more powerful together. Why keep fighting when we could collaborate and dominate this industry?" Marcus's eyes narrowed. "And I'm supposed to believe that you've suddenly become interested in playing nice after everything that's happened?" Victor smiled again, that same smug grin that had always irritated Marcus. "The past is the past, Marcus. You've done well to rebuild, but you have to understand, we're stronger now. Redwood is on the rise, and we have the resources and connections you lack." Tasha stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "We don't need your resources, Victor. We're doing just fine on our own." Evan Drake leaned back in his chair, observing the exchange carefully. There's no need to be so defensive. The offer stands. We believe there's room for growth with the right strategic alliance. We could make Sterling Hotels a part of the Redwood family. Marcus's mind raced. He knew exactly what was at stake. This wasn't just about Sterling Hotels. This was about his vision for the future, about proving that he could rise above Victor's betrayal and Evan's scheming. No, Marcus said, his voice firm. You're right about one thing. We're doing fine. And we're going to keep doing fine, without you. Victor's expression faltered, and Marcus could see the flash of frustration in his eyes. You'll regret this, Victor spat, standing up abruptly. Marcus remained calm, his confidence unwavering. I've already lived through worse, Victor. And I'm not afraid of you anymore. With that, Marcus turned to walk out of the room, leaving the tension behind. Evan and Victor didn't speak a word as he exited, but Marcus knew that this was far from over. The battle for dominance in the hotel industry had only just begun. The rejection of Victor Ford and Evan Drake's offer sent a clear message: Marcus was not a man to be intimidated or manipulated. But as Marcus walked away from that meeting, a small, unsettling voice in the back of his mind told him that Redwood Hospitality wouldn't just let it go. No, they would retaliate. Victor, in particular, had a personal vendetta against him, and Evan was no different. They wouldn't stop at a failed business proposition. This time, they would come for Marcus in a way that was both subtle and dangerous. Days passed in a tense silence. Sterling Hotels continued with its rebranding efforts, pushing forward its exclusive experiences, and the numbers were beginning to reflect the success of their new direction. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing. Every time his phone buzzed or an email arrived, his heart would skip a beat. He was waiting for the inevitable blow. Then, one evening, as Marcus sat alone in his penthouse apartment overlooking the skyline, the call came. Marcus, Tasha's voice crackled through the line, urgent. You need to see this. What happened? Marcus asked, sitting up straighter. It's a Redwood smear campaign. They've planted an article on multiple media outlets claiming that Sterling Hotels is involved in illegal business practices. They've got fabricated documents and even anonymous sources making accusations about our financials. Marcus's blood ran cold. He felt his stomach tighten. This wasn't just a business strategy. This was personal. You're sure it's a smear? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Tasha's voice was sharp. It's definitely a setup. I've already contacted our legal team. They're working on it, but the damage is already done. The media has picked it up. It's everywhere. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, staring out into the city. He could already imagine how fast this would spread, how quickly people would start doubting the integrity of Sterling Hotels. This was the kind of attack that could destroy years of hard work in an instant. If the public believed the accusations, it would be game over. Get our PR team on it. I'll meet with them tomorrow, Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. Tasha hesitated. Marcus, this goes deeper than just PR. We need to confront Evan Drake and Victor Ford directly. Marcus clenched his fists. He could feel the anger building, but he knew he couldn't let it control him. I'm not going to let them win by playing into their hands. We'll deal with it methodically. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. The Sterling team worked tirelessly, digging into the source of the smear campaign, tracing the origins of the fabricated documents and anonymous accusations. It was clear that this wasn't an accident, it was an attack designed to destroy their reputation and shake their investors' confidence. But as Marcus pored over the evidence with his legal team, something unexpected happened. They found a pattern. It's not just random media outlets, Lena said, pointing to a series of articles. These are all being published by outlets that are either owned or funded by Redwood Hospitality. Marcus's eyes narrowed. So it's a coordinated effort. Victor Ford and Evan Drake are trying to make it look like we're involved in illegal activities, to get our investors to pull out. Lena nodded. Exactly. They're trying to discredit Sterling Hotels so they can buy us out, or worse, steal our clients and partners. The weight of the realization hit Marcus hard. This wasn't just business rivalry. This was a full-scale assault on his company's existence. Marcus knew that in order to stop the smear campaign in its tracks, they needed a response that would not only clear their name but also put Redwood and Victor on the defensive. They couldn't allow themselves to be painted into a corner. Tasha worked with the PR team to craft a response that was both forceful and transparent. They would release an official statement addressing the false claims head-on. But it wouldn't stop there. Marcus decided to go further. "We need to take this to the next level," he told Tasha one morning as they sat in his office, surrounded by their team. "We need to confront Evan Drake and Victor Ford publicly. Let them know that we know what they're up to." Tasha raised an eyebrow. "You want to take it to them directly?" Marcus nodded. "Yes. We'll arrange a public interview, a debate. We'll force them to face the truth in front of the cameras. Let the public see who they really are." The day of the press conference arrived. It was set up as a live broadcast, with cameras and reporters stationed in a neutral location, a high-end conference room in downtown Los Angeles. Marcus, Tasha, and their PR team were there early, ensuring every detail was perfect. But as the time for the interview approached, Marcus felt a sense of unease in his gut. He knew this was a dangerous game. If he played it wrong, it could backfire. As Marcus stepped onto the stage, he saw the familiar faces of Evan Drake and Victor Ford already seated at the table. Both men looked calm and collected, their expressions carefully neutral, as if they were prepared for whatever Marcus might throw at them. The moderator, a well-known business journalist, began the proceedings. "Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We are here to discuss the recent controversy surrounding Sterling Hotels and its alleged financial misconduct. On one side, we have Marcus Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Hotels, and on the other, Evan Drake, CEO of Redwood Hospitality. We also have Victor Ford, formerly of Sterling Hotels. Let's begin with opening statements." Marcus sat up straighter, his mind sharp. This was it. The moment he'd been waiting for. He would not let these men destroy everything he'd built. Victor Ford spoke first, his voice smooth and calculated. "Thank you. I think we all know why we're here. Over the past few months, allegations about Sterling Hotels have surfaced, and these are not baseless rumors. As someone who was closely involved with the company, I can tell you that there's a culture of secrecy and corruption at Sterling that's been hidden from the public for far too long." The reporters in the room murmured in agreement, and Marcus could feel the heat of their questions bearing down on him. But he refused to let Victor's words sway him. "I want to make one thing perfectly clear," Marcus said, his voice strong. "What you're hearing from Victor Ford is nothing more than a desperate attempt to slander this company because he's bitter about being removed from it. These allegations are false. We've been fully transparent with our investors, our clients, and our employees. The accusations you're hearing today are part of a coordinated smear campaign designed by Redwood Hospitality, led by Evan Drake and Victor Ford." The room fell silent. Evan Drake shifted in his seat, his smile faltering. But he didn't respond immediately. Marcus continued, his gaze unwavering. "I will not let these two men manipulate the public for their own gain. We are committed to transparency and integrity, and we will not back down from these lies. We're prepared to take legal action against anyone who spreads these falsehoods. Sterling Hotels is stronger than ever." Before Evan could respond, the moderator turned to him. "Evan, would you like to address the allegations?" Evan looked at Marcus, his cool demeanor slipping for just a moment. "Let me be clear," he said, his voice tinged with irritation. "I have nothing to gain from making false accusations. My company is simply focused on competing fairly in the marketplace. But as Evan spoke, something unexpected happened. A reporter from the back of the room stood up and asked a pointed question: "Isn't it true that Redwood Hospitality has been using its media holdings to target Sterling hotels with these fabricated stories? There have been reports that some of the outlets spreading the rumors are affiliated with your company." The room fell dead silent. Marcus couldn't hide his smirk. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. Evan's face turned pale. The truth was out now, and there was nowhere for him to hide. The moderator quickly moved on, but Marcus knew that the tables had turned. The public would no longer see Sterling Hotels as the villain. Redwood Hospitality and Victor Ford had just made a massive mistake. In the days following the press conference, the world began to shift. The media storm that had once raged against Sterling Hotels had suddenly turned in Marcus's favor. The live broadcast, the pointed questions, and the undeniable exposure of Redwood Hospitality's manipulative tactics had tipped the scales. At first, it seemed like a victory. Reports flooded in, and the accusations against Sterling Hotels were quickly debunked. Financial analysts, journalists, and even industry insiders began to speak out, praising Marcus for his handling of the crisis and accusing Victor Ford and Evan Drake of orchestrating a smear campaign for their own corporate gain. But while Marcus felt the sweet relief of public validation, the storm was far from over. The battle for control of the hotel industry had escalated, and the cost of victory was far greater than he had anticipated. Tasha walked into Marcus's office the next morning, her face grim. "We've got a problem," she said, closing the door behind her. "It's the investors." Marcus's heart sank. The investors had always been the backbone of Sterling Hotels. If they pulled out, everything he had worked for would come crashing down. "What's going on?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "They're nervous. They've been getting calls from Redwood's legal team. And some of them are starting to wonder if we've really got a handle on the situation. They're concerned about the potential fallout, the long-term damage this could cause to our brand." Marcus stared at Tasha, processing the words. Redwood Hospitality had been playing the long game. They had planted seeds of doubt, and now, the very foundation of Sterling Hotels was shaking. "How many?" he asked. Tasha sighed. 5 major investors are on the fence. They're asking for assurances, clear answers. They want a solid plan for the future. Marcus leaned back in his chair. He had been here before, at the brink of losing it all. But this time, he wasn't going to let doubt or fear dictate his choices. He had built Sterling from the ground up. He would fight for it, no matter what. "We're going to show them we're stronger than ever," Marcus said, standing up. "Prepare a meeting. It's time for us to take control of the narrative." The next few days were filled with high-stakes meetings. Marcus met with his core team, including Tasha, Lena, and the head of finance, Ava, to discuss the next steps. They needed to come up with a strategic plan, one that would not only salvage their reputation but also position Sterling Hotels as the leader in luxury hospitality. "We've already proven that the smear campaign is a lie," Marcus began, pacing in front of the group. "But we need to do more. We need to show our investors that we're ready to expand. We've had our challenges, but we're not backing down." Ava raised her hand, her expression thoughtful. "But Marcus, what if the expansion doesn't happen as smoothly as we plan? The industry is volatile right now, and Redwood is always one step ahead." Marcus paused, considering her words. "That's why we need to do something bold. Something that makes a statement. We need to enter new markets. We need a flagship hotel that symbolizes everything we stand for: luxury, exclusivity, and innovation." Lena spoke up next. "You're talking about opening a new flagship property in an uncharted market, aren't you?" Marcus nodded. "Exactly. We'll build a world-class hotel in a prime city, one that sets us apart. We'll take the lead in sustainable hospitality, integrating cutting-edge technology and a guest experience unlike anything else. Tasha's eyes widened. That's a huge risk. We're talking about an investment of hundreds of millions. Marcus's expression was unwavering. We don't have the luxury of playing it safe anymore. If we want to survive, we need to take risks. And this flagship will be our redemption. We'll make it clear that Sterling Hotels is unstoppable. As Marcus and his team prepared to present their bold new vision to the investors, they received an unexpected call. The voice on the other end was cold, calculated, and familiar. Marcus, it was Victor Ford. I think it's time we had another conversation. Don't you? Marcus's grip on his phone tightened. Victor, the man who had tried to tear his company apart, was calling him now. He couldn't believe it. What do you want, Victor? Marcus's voice was icy. We both know that this is a pivotal moment for Sterling Hotels, Victor continued. You're on the edge, Marcus. Redwood Hospitality is ready to offer you a way out. We can settle this peacefully, and I promise you, you'll come out ahead. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Victor was offering him an olive branch, but Marcus could feel the manipulation oozing from his words. Victor wasn't offering a solution, he was offering a trap. I don't need your help, Victor, Marcus said, his voice low but steady. I've built Sterling Hotels on my own, and I won't let you take it from me. Victor chuckled. You'll regret this, Marcus. Evan Drake and I have more power than you think. And we're going to make sure your little company doesn't survive. Marcus ended the call, his hand trembling slightly. The threat was clear. Victor Ford and Evan Drake would stop at nothing to bring him down, but Marcus wasn't going to back down either. He had a plan, and it would take more than Redwood to break him. The day of the investor meeting arrived. Marcus stood at the head of the table, surrounded by the most influential people in the hospitality industry. Each face looked at him expectantly, waiting for answers, hoping for reassurance. Thank you for coming, Marcus began, his voice firm and commanding. I know the last few weeks have been difficult. There have been attacks on our reputation, and I understand that some of you have concerns. But I want to make one thing clear, Sterling Hotels is not going anywhere. He paused, letting his words sink in. We are about to take a giant leap forward. We're going to build a flagship hotel that will not only redefine the luxury experience but also demonstrate our commitment to innovation and sustainability. This is the future of Sterling Hotels. We are not just surviving, we are thriving. Marcus could see the skepticism in some of the investors' eyes, but there was also a flicker of intrigue. He wasn't just talking about survival, he was talking about dominance. I know this is a risk, Marcus continued. But I also know that this is what Sterling Hotels needs to stay ahead of the competition. Redwood Hospitality has tried to bring us down, but we are still here. And we are not backing down. This flagship hotel will be a symbol of everything we stand for. The meeting was tense, but Marcus's words had the desired effect. One by one, the investors nodded, their faces softening. They could see the fire in his eyes, the conviction that had made Sterling Hotels a household name. By the end of the meeting, the investors were on board. They believed in Marcus. They believed in the future of Sterling Hotels. As Marcus left the meeting, his phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Tasha. It's done. The investors are on board. We're moving forward with the flagship project. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. This was just the beginning. But as he walked out of the boardroom, he knew one thing for certain, Victor Ford and Evan Drake would come for him again. The war wasn't over yet. And Marcus was ready for whatever came next. The weeks following the investor meeting had been a whirlwind of activity. With the flagship hotel project greenlit and the backing of major investors, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. Sterling Hotels was on the rise, and for the first time in months, the future seemed bright again. Yet, Lurking in the shadows, Marcus knew the battle was far from over. Redwood Hospitality wasn't going to let him win so easily. Victor Ford and Evan Drake were relentless. They had money, influence, and connections in the highest places. But Marcus had something they didn't, an unwavering belief in what he had built and the determination to protect it. As Marcus and his team worked tirelessly to begin the groundbreaking of the new flagship hotel, an unexpected invitation arrived. It was from Victor Ford himself. The letter was carefully worded, suggesting a business dinner to discuss mutual interests. Victor wanted to sit down and clear the air. The letter implied that Redwood was willing to move on from their rivalry and discuss how both companies could coexist in the competitive hospitality market. It was a trap, Marcus knew it immediately. Victor Ford wasn't the type of man to extend a hand in friendship. This was a maneuver to throw Marcus off guard, to lure him into a false sense of security. "Don't trust him," Tasha said when Marcus showed her the letter. "This is just another attempt to gain leverage. Victor Ford doesn't negotiate. He manipulates." Marcus didn't need convincing. The sting of betrayal was still fresh. But the idea of facing Victor one last time, on his own terms, was too tempting to ignore. "I'll go," Marcus said, his voice steely. "But we'll be ready for whatever happens. This ends tonight." The dinner took place at an upscale restaurant, one known for its exclusivity and discreet atmosphere. Marcus arrived early, his mind focused on the task at hand. He was here to play chess, not checkers. Victor Ford would not control this narrative any longer. When Victor arrived, he was dressed impeccably, his usual smirk in place. He wasted no time diving into small talk, but Marcus didn't buy into his charm. The tension was palpable, and Marcus could feel the weight of the conversation that was about to unfold. "So, Marcus," Victor began, leaning back in his chair. "You've really turned things around. The flagship hotel, ambitious, I'll give you that. But tell me, how long do you think it's going to last?" Marcus kept his gaze steady, not letting Victor's words rattle him. "Longer than your attempts to tear me down. You may have thought you could break Sterling Hotels, but here we are. Stronger than ever." Victor chuckled, but there was no warmth in the sound. "You think you've won? Let me remind you, Marcus. I didn't start this war. You did. You took something from me, and now, you'll pay the price." Marcus's hand tightened around his glass of water. "You lost the right to make demands the moment you decided to destroy everything I've worked for. This isn't about revenge for you, it's about power. Redwood Hospitality wants what Sterling Hotels has. And I won't let you have it." The two men locked eyes. There was no more pretending, no more false pleasantries. This was the confrontation they had both been waiting for. Just as the conversation reached its boiling point, Evan Drake entered the room. He looked exactly as Marcus remembered, cold, calculating, and ready to do whatever it took to win. "Ah, Marcus, you were right to come," Evan said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "We've been waiting for you." Marcus's blood ran cold. He had known this was coming. Evan and Victor were not about to let him walk away from this dinner without a fight. But Marcus wasn't about to let them control the outcome. "Enough games," Marcus said, his voice like steel. "Let's be clear. I know about your smear campaign. I know about the underhanded tactics you've been using to discredit me and Sterling Hotels. You thought you could break me, but you were wrong." Evan and Victor exchanged glances, their smirks faltering for just a moment. But they recovered quickly. Victor leaned forward, his voice low. "You don't understand, Marcus. We have everything you need. We have the connections, the resources. You're just one man. You'll never be able to defeat us. It's over." But Marcus wasn't backing down. He had a trump card of his own, and it was time to play it. "I've already won, Victor," Marcus said, his eyes narrowing. You've been so focused on trying to destroy me that you forgot one thing: I'm not afraid of you anymore. Just then, Marcus's phone buzzed with an incoming message. He glanced at the screen and saw the name of the Redwood hospitality insider who had turned on them and provided Marcus with irrefutable proof of their illegal business practices. The tide had turned. Marcus had the final piece of evidence, the documents that would expose Redwood for the corrupt empire it was. With a confident smile, Marcus stood up, and his voice rang out in the silence of the room. I'm done with this. I've already taken steps to expose Redwood Hospitality's fraud. You're finished. The look on Victor Ford and Evan Drake's faces was one of shock and disbelief. They had underestimated Marcus, and now, they would pay the price for it. The legal battle that followed was swift and decisive. The media ran with the story of Redwood Hospitality's corruption, and soon, the company's reputation was in tatters. Investors pulled out, contracts were cancelled, and Redwood's stock price plummeted. As for Sterling Hotels, the flagship project was a resounding success. Marcus's bold vision became a reality, setting new standards in the luxury hospitality industry. The hotel was an instant hit, attracting celebrities, high-profile clients, and top-tier investors. In the end, Marcus had proven that with integrity, determination, and a little bit of strategic thinking, anything was possible. He had not only fought back against Redwood Hospitality, but he had come out on top. The lesson was clear: when you believe in something, no one, not even the most powerful adversaries, can take it away from you. As Marcus stood at the top of the steps leading into his flagship hotel, he looked out over the bustling city. The past year had been a roller coaster of highs and lows, but he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Did you ever think we'd make it this far? Tasha asked, walking up beside him. Marcus smiled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. I didn't know how, but I always knew we would. The journey had been long, but the destination was worth it. Sterling Hotels was no longer just a company, it was a symbol of resilience, a testament to what could be achieved when you refuse to back down. And as for Victor Ford and Evan Drake, they were nothing more than a footnote in his story. Marcus had won the war. And the future was his to shape. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?